Hello everybody. What do you think? What do you think? Cozy, right? Cozy mood, cozy chill vibes. Hello. Cute outfit. Thank you. Well, you know, we're gonna be reading books, so I had to be dressed up into the right accoutrement, I guess, into the right outfit, right? Doing stops and what? Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, okay? Don't worry about the book that I'm reading here for you today, right now, all right? You don't need to worry about it. You don't even concern yourself. Stop reading too deeply, okay? We haven't even begun reading yet, okay? Chill. Ooh, there we go. Should be connected, right? There we go. Brilliante. Okay. Hello everybody. Hi, welcome to a very special stream, which will be a read-along stream, for a community-voted book, which will be The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. It is grim-styled fairy tales told with a feminist perspective. I thoroughly enjoyed these stories. They are short stories, which include the likes of Red Riding Hood, Puss in Boots, Bluebeard, Beauty and the Beast, with vampires, werewolves, all sorts of things. And it's very fun and very cool. Now, there are a few trigger warnings that I do have to go over with you guys at first. Now, I just want to also preface about these trigger warnings. They may seem like a lot, but the way this book doesn't explore or describe things in the, I suppose, modern sense. It is very flowery and very poetic, and it is a lot about symbolism. Now, I will just read it out to you. I would just let you guys know. I would just let you guys know what is on the list and what you're kind of getting yourselves in for. So, as I mentioned, hello, welcome. My name is Asta. I am a Twilight Demon Villainess. We're doing a read-along of The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, and The Bloody Chamber is a collection of dark, gothic, grim-style fairy tales written with a feminist twist and perspective. And a lot of these stories mention, portray, and may include, but is not limited to, the following. Okay, these are your trigger warnings. Adult/minor relationships, death, pedophilia, R-word, SA, sexual content, sexual violence, toxic relationships, general violence, murder, cannibalism, and there also may be mentions of addiction, confinement, and gore/blood. Okay? Should you be disturbed by any of these topics, please, and I beg of you as your demoness to not hesitate to take a break or to mute the stream. This book is a collection of short stories, so depending on the length of said story, we'll be taking regular breaks. Should we ever wish for everyone in chat to collectively stop, I will create a poll for the majority to vote on how they'd like to proceed. Either we go ahead, or whether the majority would like to finish reading for the night. I will also check in with you after stream to see if you would like to continue with this book or move on to the next. And this option will be available for books with a lot of trigger warnings like this one. Okay? I want you guys to have an enjoyable time. I am not trying to traumatize you. I'm not trying to give you everlasting scars. That is not my intention. My intention is for you to have an enjoyable experience and to have an environment in which we can discuss these books in a healthy and educational way. Okay? So, any questions? Any questions at all before I begin on this kind of adventure that we're about to go on together? The Bloody Chamber, I have checked, is 21 pages long. So we might not finish it tonight. It might be a two-parter. But there are, again, a collection of stories. There's the Bloody Chamber. There is the Courtship of Mr. Leon. There is the Tiger's Bride. Puss in Boots, the Earl King. I'm just going through the Snow Child, which is relatively short. The Lady of the House of Love, and the Werewolf, or the Company of Wolves, and then Wolf Alice. Yeah, so those are all the stories. How am I? I'm doing good. I'm doing all right. I have had a pretty nice day. And it's just been very chill and relaxing. Legacy says, will you focus on reading or will you read and chat with chat? Well, like I said, we're going to be reading today. That's the whole point of the stream. So I will be reading, but we will be taking regular breaks. So during those breaks, feel free. We're more than happy to chat. If there are things that I wanted to integrate for this stream, but I wanted to keep it as simple as possible so I didn't stress myself out. But things that I want to kind of integrate in the future is live captions so that you guys can visualize and see the words that I'm reading to you rather than just hear me say them. And other things as well. But again, we'll be focusing on reading because that's the whole point of the stream. And then when we're not reading, when we're taking little breaks, we can then chat and gabber and talk about books or the story that we're reading. So yeah, it's entirely up to you guys. This is supposed to be just a chill, relaxing stream for us to just vibe and have cozy times. And I say that, and the beginning of this, the beginning pages of the Bloody Chamber are chill. To be fair, I completely forgot these were the trigger warnings for this book. Because my memory of reading this book was, ooh, I really enjoyed this book and the symbolism of this book. Completely forgot. So, yes. Either way. Any other questions? Any other questions for you, Demoness, before she begins? Anything else? Anything else? You guys cool? Did you get boba today? I did not get boba today. Sad? Yeah. Yeah, very sad. Very, very sad. But it's okay. Because guess what? Because I am reading, it's actually very good that I don't have boba. Glint, good evening. Marco, when we start, we're going to be reading a book called The Bloody Chamber today. Consider me your live audiobook. I will be reading to you, and allowing you to be immersed in the world of gothic feminist horror, essentially. So if that is your vibe, if you are okay with that, that's perfectly fine. Again, I have read through all the content warnings and the trigger warnings. Should you ever feel disturbed by any of the topics that are explored in the book, feel free to leave the stream. You do not have to stay. If you need to take a break, feel free to do that too. Those options are available to you guys. I have marked the Clock app streams and any other streams as 18 plus as well. Can you pin the trigger warnings in the chat? I will do. Already on it. No worries. Specifically so that people who join later will be able to see. But again, with these trigger warnings, they may seem like a lot. The storytelling is incredibly poetic. So it's not that it dances around the subject, but the subject is padded with flowery language. But how she uses that flowery language is very telling. The names for today's book. Wonderful. I mean, not wonderful. There's a lot, but I'm sure the people also on the Clock app can see the trigger warnings as well. So I'm just gonna get us started because it's been 16 minutes, and technically I started stream late, which apologies. I was trying to get things set up and I got distracted by friends. Let me know if the music is too loud or too quiet or... What kind of freaky book has all this, bruh? Well, here's the thing. I think a lot of people have been desensitized to what grim fairy tales mean. When people talk about fairy tales, you think about like happy, fun, good ending vibes. When you think of grim fairy tales, people are like, oh, it's just edgy. It's just edgy fairy tales. No, they're called grim for a reason. They are dark. They are dark fairy tales. And this book are all grim fairy tales told from a feminist perspective. So it's a lot. Say less, there were no questions. No worries. No worries. You immediately got it from the moment I mentioned grim fairy tales. So good. Okay, let us start. So again, we have... There's a plane going overhead. Okay. This is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. I remember how, that night, I lay awake in the wagon lit in a tender, delicious ecstasy of excitement, my burning cheek pressed against the impeccable linen of the pillow and the pounding of my heart mimicking that of the great pistons ceaselessly thrusting the train that bore me through the night, away from Paris, away from girlhood, away from the white, enclosed quietude of my mother's apartment, into the unguessable country of marriage. And I remember I tenderly imagined how, at this very moment, my mother would be moving slowly about the narrow bedroom I had left behind forever, folding up and putting away all my little relics, the tumbled garments I would not need anymore, the scores for which there had been no room in my trunks, the concert programs I'd abandoned. She would linger over this torn ribbon and that faded photograph of all the half-joyous, half-sorrowful emotions of a woman on her daughter's wedding day. And, in the midst of my bridal triumph, I felt a pang of loss, as if, when he put the gold band on my finger, I had in some way ceased to be her child in becoming his wife. "Are you sure?" she'd said, when they delivered the gigantic box that held the wedding dress he'd bought me, wrapped in tissue paper and red ribbon like a Christmas gift of crystallized fruit. "Are you sure you love him?" There was a dress for her, too. Black silk, with the dull, prismatic sheen of oil on water finer than anything she'd worn since that adventurous girlhood in Indochina, daughter of a rich tea planter. My eagle-featured, indomitable mother. What other student at the conservatoire could boast that her mother had outfaced a junkful of Chinese pirates, nursed a village through a visitation of the plague, shot a man-eating tiger with her own hand, and all before she was as old as I? "Are you sure you love him?" "I'm sure I want to marry him," I said, and would say no more. She sighed, as if it was some reluctance that she might at last banish the spectre of poverty from its habitual place at our meagre table. For my mother herself had gladly, scandalously, defiantly begged herself for love. And, one fine day, her gallant soldier never returned from the wars, leaving his wife and child a legacy of tears that never quite dried, a cigar box full of medals and the antique service revolver that my mother, grown magnificently eccentric in hardship, kept always in her reticule in case, how I teased her, she was surprised by footpads on her way home from the grocer's shop. Now and then a starburst of light spattered the drawn blinds as if the railway company had lit up all the stations through which we had passed in celebration of the bride. My satin nightdress had just been shaken from its wrappings. It had slipped over my young girl's pointed breasts and shoulders, supple as a garment of heavy water, and now teasingly caressed me, egregious, insinuating, nudging between my thighs as I shifted relentlessly in my narrow berth. His kiss with tongue and teeth in it, and a rasp of beard, had hinted to me, though with the same exquisite tact as this nightdress he'd given me, of the wedding night, which would be voluptuously deferred until we lay in his great ancestral bed in the sea-girt pinnacled domain that lay, still, beyond the grasp of my imagination. That magic place. The fairy castle whose walls were made of foam. That legendary habitation in which he had been born, to which one day I might bear an heir. Our destination. My destiny. Above the syncopated roar of the train, I could hear his even, steady breath. Only the communicating door kept me from my husband, and it stood open. As if I rose up on my elbow, I could see the dark leonine shape of his head, and my nostrils caught a whiff of the opulent male scent of leather and spices that always accompanied him, and sometimes, during his courtship, had been the only hint he gave me that he had come into my mother's sitting room, for, though he was a big man, he moved as softly as if all his shoes had soles of velvet, as if his footfall turned the carpet into snow. He had loved to surprise me in my abstracted solitude at the piano. He would tell them not to announce him, then soundlessly open the door and softly creep behind me with his bouquet of hothouse flowers or his box of marrons glacés. Lay his offering upon the keys and clasp his hands over my eyes as I was lost in a Debussy prelude. But that perfume of spiced leather always betrayed him. After my first shock, I was forced always to mimic surprise, so that he would not be disappointed. He was older than I. He was much older than I. There were streaks of pure silver in his dark mane. But his strange, heavy, almost waxen face was not lined by experience. Rather, experience seems to have washed it perfectly smooth, like a stone on a beach whose fissures had been eroded by successive tides. And sometimes that face, in stillness when he listened to me playing, with the heavy eyelids folded over eyes that always disturbed me by their absolute absence of light, seemed to me like a mask, as if his real face, the face that truly reflected all the life he had led in the world before he met me, before even I was born, as though that face lay underneath this mask. Or elsewhere. As though he had laid by the face in which he had lived for so long in order to offer my youth a face unsigned by the years. And elsewhere, I might see him plain. Elsewhere, but where? In perhaps that castle to which train now took us, that marvelous castle in which he had been born. Even when he asked me to marry him and I said, yes, still he did not lose that heavy, fleshy composure of his. I know it must seem a curious analogy, a man with a flower, but sometimes he seemed to me like a lily. Yes, a lily. Possessed of that strange, ominous calm of a sentient vegetable, like one of those cobra-headed funeral lilies whose white sheaves are curled out, of a flesh as thick and tensely yielded to the touch as vellum. When I said that I would marry him, not one muscle in his face stirred, but he let out a long, extinguished sigh. I thought, oh, how he must want me. And it was as though the imponderable weight of his desire was a force I might not withstand, not by virtue of its violence, but because of its very gravity. He had the ring ready in a leather box lined with crimson velvet, a fire opal the size of a pigeon's egg, set in a complicated circle of dark antique gold. My old nurse, who still lived with my mother and me, squinted at the ring askance. Opals are bad luck, she said. But this opal had been his own mother's ring, and his grandmother's, and her mother's before that, given to an ancestor by Catherine de Medici. Every bride that came to the castle wore it, time out of mind. And did he give it to his other wives, and have it back from them? Asked the old woman rudely. Yet she was a snob. She hid her incredulous joy at my marital coup, her little marquis, behind a facade of fault-finding. But here, she touched me. I shrugged and turned my back pettishly on her. I did not want to remember how he had loved other women before me, but the knowledge often teased me in the threadbare self-confidence of the small hours. I was 17, and knew nothing of the world. My marquis had been married before, more than once, and I remained a little bemused that, after those others, he should now have chosen me. Indeed, he was not still in mourning for his last wife? Tusk, tusk, went my old nurse. And even my mother had been reluctant to see her girl whisked off by a man so recently bereaved. A Romanian countess, a lady of high fashion, dead just 3 short months before I met him. A boating accident at his home in Brittany. They never found her body, but I rummaged through the back copies of the society magazines my old nanny kept in a trunk under her bed and tracked down her photograph. The sharp muzzle of a pretty, witty, naughty monkey. Such potent and bizarre charm. Of a dark, bright, wild yet worldly thing whose natural habitat must have been some luxurious interior decorator's jungle filled with potted palms and tame, squawking parakeets. Before that, her face is common property. Everyone painted her, but the red on engraving I liked the best. the evening star walking on the rim of night. To see her skeletal, enigmatic grace, you would never think she had been a barmaid in a cafe in Montmartre, until Puvis de Chavannes saw her and had her expose her flat breasts and elongated thighs to his brush. And yet, it was the absinthe doomed her, or so they said. The first of all his ladies, that sumptuous diva, I had heard her sing Isolde. Precociously musical child that I was, taken to the opera for a birthday treat. My first opera, I had heard her sing Isolde. With what white-hot passion had she burned from that stage, so that you could tell she would die young. We sat high up, halfway to the heaven in the gods, yet she half blinded me, and my father, still alive, oh so long ago, took hold of my sticky little hand to comfort me in the last act, yet all I heard was the glory of her voice. Married 3 times within my own brief lifetime to 3 different graces, now, as if to demonstrate the eclecticism of his taste, he had invited me to join this gallery of beautiful women. I, the poor widow's child with my mouse-coloured hair that still bore the kinks of the plaits from which it had so recently been freed. My bony hips, my nervous pianist fingers. He was as rich as Croesus. The night before our wedding, a simple affair, at the mairie, because his countess was so recently gone, he took my mother and me, curious coincidence, to see Tristan. And do you know, my heart swelled and ached so during the Liebestod that I thought I must truly love him. Yes, I did. On his arm, all eyes were upon me. The whispering crowd in the foyer parted like the Red Sea to let us through. My skin crisped at his touch. How my circumstances had changed since the first time I heard those voluptuous chords that carried such a charge of deathly passion in them. Now, we sat in a loge, in a red velvet armchair, and a braided, bewigged flunky brought us a silver bucket of iced champagne in the interval. The froth spilled over the rim of my glass and drenched my hands. I thought, my cup runneth over. And I had on a porée dress. He had prevailed upon my reluctant mother to let him buy my trousseau. Turning page. What would I have gone to him in otherwise? Twice darned, underwear, faded gingham, serge skirts, hand-me-downs. So, for the opera, I wore a sinuous shift of white muslin, tied with a silk string under the breasts. And everyone stared at me. And at his wedding gift. His wedding gift, clasped round my throat, a choker of rubies 2 inches wide, like an extraordinarily precious slit throat. After the terror, in the early days of the Directory, the aristos who'd escaped the guillotine had an ironic fad of tying a red ribbon round their necks at just the point where the blade would have sliced it through. A red ribbon like the memory of a wound. And his grandmother, taken with the notion, had her ribbon made up in rubies. Such a gesture of luxurious defiance. That night at the opera comes back to me even now. The white dress, the frail child within it, and the flashing crimson jewels round her throat, bright as arterial blood. I saw him watching me in the gilded mirrors with the assessing eye of a connoisseur inspecting horse flesh. Or even of a housewife in the market inspecting cuts on the slab. I'd never seen or else had ever acknowledged that regard of his before, the sheer carnal avarice of it, and it was strangely magnified by the monocle lodged in his left eye. When I saw him look at me with lust, I dropped my eyes, but in glancing away from him, I caught sight of myself in the mirror, and I saw myself, suddenly, as he saw me. My pale face, the way the muscles in my neck stuck out like thin wire. I saw how much that cruel necklace became me. And for the first time in my innocent, confined life, I sensed in myself a potentiality for corruption that took my breath away. The next day, we were married. The train slowed, shuddered to a halt. Lights, clank of metal, a voice declaring the name of an unknown, never-to-be-visited station. Silence of the night, the rhythm of his breathing that I should sleep with, now, for the rest of my life. And I could not sleep. I stealthily sat up, raised the blind a little and huddled against the cold window that misted over with the warmth of my breathing, gazing out at the dark platform towards those rectangles of domestic lamplight that promised warmth, company, a supper of sausages hissing in a pan on the stove for the station master, his children tucked up in bed asleep in the brick house with the painted shutters. All the paraphernalia of the everyday world for which I, with my stunning marriage, had exiled myself. Into marriage, into exile. I sensed it. I knew it. That, henceforth, I would always be lonely. Yet that was part of the already familiar weight of the fire opal that glimmered like a... We cannot say this word. Like a traveller's magic ball, so that I could not take my eyes off it when I played the piano. This ring, the bloody bandage of rubies, the wardrobe of clothes from Poiret and Worth, his scent of Russian leather, all had conspired to seduce me so utterly that I could not say I felt one single twinge of regret for the world of tartans and mammon that now receded from me as if drawn away on a string, like a child's toy, as the train began to throb again, as if in delighted anticipation of the distance it would take me. The first grey streamers of the dawn now flew in the sky, and an eldritch half-light seeped into the railway carriage. I heard no change in his breathing, but my heightened, excited senses told me he was awake and gazing at me. A huge man, an enormous man, and his eyes dark and motionless as those eyes the ancient Egyptians painted upon their sarcophagi. Fixed upon me. I felt a certain tension in the pit of my stomach. To be so watched in such silence. A match struck. He was igniting a Romeo, a Juliet, fat as a baby's arm. Soon, he said in his resonant voice that was like the tolling of a bell. And I felt all at once a sharp premonition of dread that lasted only as long as the match flared. And I could see his white, broad face, as if it were hovering, disembodied above the sheets, illuminated from below, like a grotesque carnival head. Then the flame died. The cigar glowed, and filled the compartment with a remembered fragrance that made me think of my father, how he would hug me in a warm fug of Havana, when I was a little girl, before he kissed me and left me and died. As soon as my husband handed me down from the high step of the train, I smelled the amniotic salinity of the ocean. It was November. The trees, stunted by the Atlantic gales, were bare, and the lonely halt was deserted but for his leather-gaitered chauffeur waiting meekly beside the sleek black motor car. It was cold. I drew my furs about me. A wrap of white and black broad stripes, of ermine and sable, with a collar from which my head rose like a calyx of a wildflower. I swear to you I had never been vain until I met him. The bell clanged. The straining train leapt its leash and left us at that lonely wayside halt where only he and I had descended. Oh, the wonder of it! How all that might of iron and steam had paused only to suit his convenience, the richest man in France. I'm gonna take a little sip of water. Sip, sip. Hello, everybody. Madame, the chauffeur eyed me. Was he comparing me invidiously to the countess, the artist's model, the opera singer? I hid behind my furs as if they were a system of soft shields. My husband liked me to wear my opal over my kid glove, a showy theatrical trick, but the moment the ironic chauffeur glimpsed its shimmering flash, he smiled, as though it was proof positive I was his master's wife. And we drove towards the widening dawn that now streaked half the sky with a wintry bouquet of pink, of roses, orange of tiger lilies, as if my husband had ordered me a sky from a florist. The day broke around me like a cool dream. Sea, sand, a sky that melts into the sea, a landscape of misty pastels with a look about it of being continuously on the point of melting. A landscape with all the I don't know how to pronounce this word. Give me one moment. Deliquescent? There are a lot of words in this book that I'm like, what are you saying, girl? To be fair, it's a lot of French words. I should have known the French.
Deliquescent.
Ah, deliquescent. I was close. Cool. Apparently it means, for people curious, it is something that becomes liquid or has the tendency to become liquid. It is often used in chemistry. A landscape with all the deliquescent harmonies of Debussy, of the etudes I played for him, the reverie I'd been playing that afternoon in the salon, of the princess where I'd first met him. Among the teacups and the little cakes, I, the orphan, hired out of charity to give them their digestive of music. And his castle. The fairy solitude of the place, with its turrets of misty blue, its courtyard, its spiked gate, his castle that lay on the very bosom of the sea, with seabirds mewing about its attics, the casements opening on the green and purple, evanescent departments of the ocean cut off by the tide, from land for half a day, that castle, at home neither on the land nor on the water, a mysterious amphibious place, contravening, again words with this woman, the materiality of both earth and the waves, with the melancholy of a mermaid who perches on her rock and waits endlessly for a lover who had drowned far away long ago. That lovely, sad sea siren of a place. The tide was low. At this hour, so early in the morning, the causeway rose up out of the sea. As the car turned on to the wet cobbles between the slow margins of water, he reached out for my hand that had his sultry, witchy ring on it, pressed my fingers, kissed my palm with extraordinary tenderness. His face was as still as I'd ever seen it, still as a pond, iced thickly over, yet his lips, that always looked so strangely red and naked between the black fringes of his beard, now curved a little. He smiled. He welcomed his bride home. No room, no corridor that did not rustle with the sound of the sea, and all the ceilings, the walls on which his ancestors in the stern regalia of rank lined up with their dark eyes and white faces, were stippled with refracted light from the waves which were always in motion. That luminous, murmurous castle of which I was the chatelaine? Chatelet, yes. I, the little music student whose mother had sold all her jewellery, even her wedding ring, to pay the fees at the conservatoire. First of all, there was the small ordeal of my initial interview with the housekeeper, who kept this extraordinary machine, this anchored, castelled ocean liner, in smooth running order no matter who stood on the bridge. How tenuous, I thought, might be my authority here. She had a bland, pale, impassive, dislikable face beneath the impeccably starched white and linen headdress of the region. Her greeting, correct but lifeless, chilled me. Daydreaming, I dared presume too much on my status. Briefly wondered how I might install my old nurse, so much loved, however cosily incompetent, in her place. Ill-considered schemings, he told me this one had been his foster mother, was bound to his family in the utmost feudal complicity. As much part of the house as I am, my dear. Now, her thin lips offered me a proud little smile. She would be my ally as long as I was his, and with that I must be content. But here, it would be easy to be content. In the turret suite he had given me for my very own, I could gaze out over the tumultuous Atlantic and imagine myself the queen of the sea. There was Bechstein for me in the music room, and on the wall another wedding present, an early Flemish primitive of Saint Cecilia at her celestial organ. In the prim charm of this saint, with her plump, sallow cheeks and crinkled brown hair, I saw myself as I could have wished to be. I warmed to a loving sensitivity I had not hitherto suspected in him. Then he led me up a delicate spiral staircase to my bedroom. Before she discreetly vanished, the housekeeper set him, chuckling with some, I dare say, lewd blessing for newlyweds in her native Breton. That I did not understand. That he, smiling, refused to interpret. And there lay the grand, hereditary, matrimonial bed, itself the size, almost, of my little room at home, with the gargoyles carved on its surfaces of ebony, vermilion lacquer, gold leaf, and its white gauze curtains billowing in the sea breeze, our bed. And surrounded by so many mirrors. Mirrors on all the walls in stately frames of contorted gold that reflected more white lilies than I'd ever seen in my life before. He'd filled the room with them, to greet the bride, the young bride who had become the multitude of girls I saw in the mirrors, identical in their chic navy blue tailor-mades for traveling, madame, or walking. A maid had dealt with the furs, henceforth a maid would deal with everything. "See," he said, gesturing towards those elegant girls, "I have acquired a whole harem for myself." I found that I was trembling. My breath came thickly. I could not meet his eye and turned my head away, out of pride, out of shyness, and watched a dozen husbands approach me in a dozen mirrors and slowly, methodically, teasingly unfasten the buttons of my jacket and slip it from my shoulders. Enough, no more. Off comes the skirt, and next the blouse, an apricot linen that cost more than the dress I had for First Communion. The play of the waves outside in the cold sun glittered on his monocle. His movements seemed to me deliberately coarse, vulgar. The blood rushed to my face again and stayed there. And yet, you see, I guessed it might be so that we should have a formal disrobing of the bride, a ritual from the brothel. Sheltered as my life had been, how could I have failed, even in the world of prim Bohemia in which I lived, to have heard hints of his world? He stripped me, gourmand that he was, as if he were stripping the leaves off an artichoke, but did not imagine much finesse about it. This artichoke was no particular treat for the diner, nor was he yet in any greedy haste. He approached his familiar treat He approached his familiar treat with a weary appetite, and when nothing but my scarlet, palpitating core remained, I saw in the mirror the living image of an etching by Rops, from the collection he had shown me when our engagement permitted us to be alone together. The child with her stick-like limbs, naked but for her button boots, her gloves, shielding her face with her hand as though her face were the last repository of her modesty. And the old monocled lecher who examined her limb by limb. He in his London tailoring, she bare as a lamb chop. Most pornographic of all confrontations. And so my purchaser unwrapped his bargain, and, as at the opera, when I had first seen my flesh in his eyes, I was aghast to feel myself stirring. At once he closed my legs like a book, and I saw again the rare movement of his lips that meant he smiled. Not yet. Later. Anticipation is the greater part of pleasure, my little love. And I began to shudder, like a racehorse before a race, yet also with a kind of fear, for I felt both a strange and impersonal arousal at the thought of love, and at the same time, a repugnance I could not stifle for his white, heavy flesh that had too much in common with the armfuls of almond lilies that filled my bedroom in great glass jars, those undertaker's lilies with the heavy pollen that powders your fingers as if you had dipped them in turmeric. The lilies I always associate with him, that are white and stain you. This scene from a voluptuary's life was now abruptly terminated. It turns out he has business to attend to, his estates, his companies. Even on your honeymoon? Even then, said the red lips that kissed me before he left me alone with my bewildered senses, a wet, silken brush from his beard, a hint of the pointed tip of the tongue. Disgruntled, I wrapped a negligee of antique lace around me to sip the little breakfast of hot chocolate the maid brought me. After that, since it was second nature to me, there was nowhere to go but the music room, and soon I settled down at my piano. Yet only a series of subtle discords flowed from beneath my fingers. Out of tune. Only a little out of tune, but I'd been blessed with perfect pitch and could not bear to play any more. Sea breezes are bad for pianos. We shall need a resident piano tuner on the premises if I am to continue with my studies. I flung down the lid in a little fury of disappointment. What should I do now? How shall I pass the long, sea-lit hours until my husband beds me? I shivered to think of that. His library seemed the source of his habitual odour of Russian leather. Row upon row of calf-bound volumes, brown and olive, with gilt lettering on their spines. The octavo in brilliant scarlet morocco. A deep-buttoned leather sofa to recline on, a lectern carved like a spread eagle that held open upon it an edition of Huysmans' La Basse from some over-exquisite private press. It had been bound like a missal, in brass with gems of coloured glass. The rugs on the floor, deep pulsing blues of heaven and red of the heart's darkest, dearest blood, came from Isfahan and Bokhara. The dark panelling gleamed. There was the lulling music of the sea and a fire of apple logs. The flames flickered along the spines inside a glass-fronted case that held books still crisp and new. Eliphas Levi. The name meant nothing to me. I squinted at a title or two. The Initiation, The Key of Mysteries, The Secret of Pandora's Box, and yawned. Nothing here to detain a 17-year-old girl waiting for her first embrace. I should have liked, best of all, a novel in yellow paper. I wanted to curl up on the rug before the blazing fire, lose myself in a cheap novel, munch sticky liquor chocolates. If I rang for them, a maid would bring me chocolates. Nevertheless, I opened the doors of that bookcase idly to browse, and I think I knew by some tingling of the fingertips, even before I opened that slim volume with no title at all on the spine, what I should find inside it. When he showed me the Rops, newly bought, dearly prized, had he not hinted that he was a connoisseur of such things? Yet I had not bargained for this, the girl with tears hanging on her cheeks like stuck pearls, her cunt a split fig below the great globes of her buttocks, on which the cotton tails of the cat were about to descend, while a man in a black mask fingered with his free hand his prick, that curved upwards like a scimitar he held. The picture had a caption: Reproof of Curiosity. My mother, with all the precision of her eccentricity, had told me what it was that lovers did. I was innocent but not naive. The Adventures of Ulay, to the Flyleaf in Amsterdam in 1748, a rare collector's piece. Had some ancestor brought it back himself from that northern city? Or had my husband bought it for himself from one of these dusty little bookshops on the left bank, where an old man peers at you through spectacles an inch thick, daring you to inspect his wares? I turned the pages in anticipation of fear. The print was rusty. Here was another steel engraving, emulation of the Wives of the Sultan. I knew enough for what I saw in that book to make me gasp. There was a pungent intensification of the odour of leather that suffused his library. His shadow fell across the massacre. "My little nun has found the prayer books, has she?" he demanded, with a curious mixture of mockery and relish. Then, seeing my painful, furious bewilderment, he laughed at me aloud, snatched a book from my hand and put it down on the sofa. "Have the nasty pictures scared baby? Baby mustn't play with grown-ups' toys until she learnt how to handle them, must she?" Then he kissed me. And with, this time, no reticence. He kissed me and laid his hand imperatively upon my breast beneath the sheath of ancient lace. I stumbled on the winding stair that led to the bedroom, to the carved gilded bed on which he had been conceived. I stammered foolishly, "We've not taken luncheon yet, and beside, it is broad daylight. All the better to see you." He made me put on my choker, the family heirloom of one woman who had escaped the blade. With trembling fingers, I fastened the thing about my neck. It was as cold as ice and chilled me. He twined my hair into a rope and lifted it off my shoulders so that he could better kiss the dowry furrows below my ears. That made me shudder. And he kissed those blazing rubies too. He kissed them before he kissed my mouth. Wrapped, he intoned, of her apparel she retains only her sonorous jewelry. A dozen husbands impaled a dozen brides, while the mewing gulls swung on invisible trapezes in the empty air outside. I was brought to my senses by the insistent shrilling of the telephone. He lay beside me, felled like an oak, breathing stertorously, as if he had been fighting with me. In the course of that one-sided struggle, I had seen his deathly composure shatter like a porcelain vase flung against a wall. I had heard him shriek and blaspheme at an orgasm. I had bled. And perhaps I had seen his face without its mask, and perhaps I had not. Yet I had been infinitely disheveled by the loss of my virginity. I gathered myself together, reached into the cloisonne cupboard beside the bed that concealed the telephone and addressed the mouthpiece. His agent in New York. Urgent. I shook him awake and rolled over on my side, cradling my spent body in my arms. His voice buzzed like a hive of distant bees. My husband, who, with so much love, filled my bedroom with lilies until it looked like an embalming parlor. Those somnolent lilies that waved their heavy heads, distributing their lush, insolent incense reminiscent of pampered flesh. When he'd finished with the agent, he turned to me and stroked the ruby necklace that bit into my neck. But with such tenderness now that I ceased flinching. And he caressed my breasts. "My dear one, my little love, my child, did it hurt her?" He's so sorry for it. Such impetuousness. He could not help himself. You see, he loves her so. And this lover's recitative? Another word I do not know. We're learning today. I feel like I should have a thesaurus with this woman. What is it? This woman's too smart. This woman's way too smart. The word she's using. Recitative. Do you know what I'm thinking? A lot of these words, I think, have roots in French. So recitative. What a mouthful. It is musical declamation of the kind usually in the narrative and dialogue part of an opera or oratorio, sung in the rhythm of ordinary speech with many words on the same note. The more you know. And his lover's recitative of his brought my tears in a flood. I clung to him as though only the one who had inflicted the pain could comfort me for suffering for it. For a while he murmured to me in a voice I'd never heard before, a voice like the soft consolations of the sea. But then he unwound the tendrils of my hair from the buttons of his smoking jacket, kissed my cheeks briskly, and told me the agent from New York had called with such urgent business that he must leave as soon as the tide was low enough. Leave the castle? Leave France? And would be away for at least 6 weeks. But it is our honeymoon. A deal, an enterprise of hazard and chance involving several millions lay in the balance, he said. He drew away from me into that waxwork stillness of his. I was only a little girl. I did not understand. And he said, unspoken to my wounded vanity, I have had too many honeymoons to find them in the least pressing commitments. Such an evil book using so many French words, right? What the hell? I know quite well that this child I've brought with a handful of coloured stones and the pelts of dead beasts won't run away. But after he'd called his Paris agent to book a passage for the States next day, just one tiny call, my little one, we should have time for dinner together. And I had to be content with that. A Mexican dish of pheasant with walnuts and chocolate salad, white voluptuous cheese, a sorbet of muscat grapes, and asti spumante. A celebration of Krug exploded festively, and then acrid black coffee in precious little cups so fine it shadowed the birds with which they were planted. I had cointreau? Yeah. He had cognac in the library, with the purple velvet curtains drawn against the night, where he took me to perch on his knee in a leather armchair beside the flickering log fire. He had made me change into that chaste little prairie shift of white muslin. He seemed especially quite fond of it. My breasts showed through the flimsy stuff, he said, like little soft white doves that sleep, each one with one pink eye open. But he would not let me take off my ruby choker, although it was growing very uncomfortable, nor fasten up my descending hair, the sign of virginity so recently ruptured that still remained a wounded presence between us. He twined his fingers in my hair until I winced. I said, I remember, very little. The maid will have changed our sheets already, he said. We do not hang the bloody sheets out of the window to prove to the whole of Brittany you are a virgin, not in these civilized times. But I should tell you it would have been the first time in all my married lives I could have shown my interested tenants such a flag. Then I realized, with a shock of surprise, how it must have been my innocence that captivated him. The silent music, he said, of my unknowingness, like la tresse des audiences ou clair de lune. French words. Played upon a piano with keys of ether. You must remember how ill at ease I was in that luxurious place, how unease had been my constant companion during the whole length of my courtship by his grave satyr, who now gently matriarized my hair. To know that my naivety gave him some pleasure made me take heart. Courage! I shall act the fine lady to the manner born one day, if only by virtue of default. Then, slowly yet teasingly, as if he were giving a child a great mysterious treat, he took out a bunch of keys from some interior hidey-hole in his jacket. Key after key, a key, he said, for every lock in the house. Key of all kinds, huge ancient things of black iron, others slender, delicate, almost baroque. Wafer-thin Yale keys for safes and boxes, and, during his absence, it was I who must take care of all of them. I eyed the heavy bunch with circumspection. Until that moment, I had not given a single thought to the practical aspects of marriage with a great house, great wealth, a great man, whose key ring was as crowded as that of a prison warden. Here were the clumsy and archaic keys for the dungeons. For dungeons we had plenty, although they had been converted to cellars for his wines, the dusty bottles inhabited in racks all those deep holes of pain in the rock, of which the castle was built. Those are the keys to the kitchen. This is the key to the picture gallery, a treasure house filled by 5 centuries of avid collectors. He foresaw I would spend hours there. He had amply indulged his taste for the symbolists. He told me with a glint of greed. There was Moreau's great portrait of his first wife, the famous sacrificial victim, with the imprint of the lace-like chains on her pellucid skin. Did I know the story of the painting of that picture? How, when she took off her clothes for him for the first time, she, fresh from her bar in Montmartre, she had robed herself involuntarily in a blush that reddened her breasts, her shoulders, her arms, her whole body? He had thought of that story, of that dear girl when he first had undressed me. Insur, the great Insur. His monolithic canvas, the foolish virgins, 2 or 3 late Guargans, his special favourite, the one of the tranced brown girl in the desert house which was called Out of the Night We Come, Into the Night We Go. And besides the additions he had made for himself, his marvellous inheritance of Watteaus, Porcines, and a pair of very special fragonards commissioned for a licentious ancestor who, it was said, had poised for the master brush himself, with his own 2 daughters. He broke off his catalogue of treasures abruptly. Your thin white face, chérie, he said, as if he saw it for the first time. Your thin white face, with its promise of debauchery only a connoisseur could detect. A log fell in the fire, instigating a shower of sparks. The opal on my finger spurted green flame. I felt as giddy as if I were on the edge of the precipice. I was afraid, not so much of him, of his monstrous presence. Heavy, as if he had been gifted at birth with more specific gravity than the rest of us. The presence that, even when I thought myself most in love with him, always subtly oppressed me. No, I was not afraid of him, but of myself. I seemed reborn in his unreflective eyes, reborn in unfamiliar shapes. I hardly recognized myself from his descriptions of me, and yet, might there not be a grain of beastly truth in them? And in the red firelight I blushed again, unnoticed, to think he might have chosen me because, in my innocence, he sensed a rare talent for corruption. Here is the key to the china cabinet. Don't laugh, my darling. There's a king's ransom in Sèvres, in that closet, and a queen's ransom in Limoges. These are French words. Dunno. These are French words. Trying my best. And a key to the locked, barred room where 5 generations of plate were kept. Keys. He would trust me with the keys to his office, although I was only a baby, and the keys to his safes where he kept the jewels I should wear. He promised me when we returned to Paris. Such jewels! Why, I would be able to change my earrings and necklaces 3 times a day, just as the Empress Josephine used to change her underwear. He doubted, he said, with that hollow, knocking sound that served him for a chuckle. I would be quite so interested in his share of certificates, although they, of course, were worth infinitely more. I will take a break here. Let us take a break. We have been going for about an hour now. I will take a little break. So we're taking a little break. For the people commenting in chat, sorry that I wasn't reading, but as established early on, when we read books, we read books. When we take breaks, we read chat. So, that was... It's really strange reading this book, because it's like reading certain things and then remembering. Remembering when I read it for the first time. And being able to read it the second time, having read it before, and seeing all the little descriptions and little signs and all these things has been really intriguing. Has been really intriguing to see. And the lead up to it as well. Dom, thank you for the follow. Thank you. Appreciate it. I hope you are all enjoying these chill vibes, these chill streams. If you are new here and you have not seen the trigger warnings, I cannot pin them in the TikTok chat. So you just have to deal with it as it comes. But thank you for vibing. And if you haven't seen the trigger warnings, I will read them again. The trigger warnings for this book, we've already kind of gone past the scene where it is implied, and this is what I mean by like the narrative of this book is very poetic and flowery, and there are a lot of big words. But we will get through them together, and I will try my best. I am the kind of person who is used to reading words in her head and not reading them aloud. So if you see me pause and like have to look it up, it's either because I'm like, okay, let me see if I can figure out this word, or I'm just gonna make an attempt at saying the word and then go about my day. Like a poire dress. So it's poire. So it's spelt very French, is what I will say. It is spelt Poiret. So poire was the first kind of attempt I made, and then poire because I was like, there's a lot of French words. So that's not it at all. No. Those are not the words I said. Those are not the letters I said at all. But you know what? You tried your best. Let me fix the chat for a bit. Also, sorry, apologies, people on YouTube who, there we go. Sorry, people on YouTube who wanted, who messaged and I didn't see your message. I was reading. I was reading and I couldn't see your chat. But yeah, these are how these streams are gonna go, guys. Chill vibes. I'm supposed to be in the background while she gets stuff done. Hey, you don't really have to do much. It's just good vibes. But try to write it as French as possible. That's fair. That's fair. There are some very French words in this book. Very French words. Which makes sense, you know. She's marrying Marquis. It's based in France. It makes sense that there are going to be a lot of French words. You know, it makes sense. So there would be a lot of French words. But yeah, is it weird to say that I'm thoroughly enjoying this book? I knew that I liked this book before, but she has such a way with establishing things. And I'm sure if we, like, you know, I mean, I've done it before, but I'm sure if I took the time and was like, here are all the themes, here are all the motifs, here are all the da-da-da-da-da, I could point out a bunch of stuff to you guys that you may not, like, be catching on to or have noticed with the book. So yeah, I don't know. I'm finding it very... It feels nice. It feels nice to be reading again. I like how the TikTok chat is very just confused. They're like, what the hell are you reading? What are you reading? What the hell are you reading? And it's like, girly pops. Girly pops. It's not that deep. Just vibe. You know? Just vibe. Just vibe. For people who want to know, it is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter, a collection of short stories that are grim fairy tales. Weird people for real? Yeah. Just vibe, just chill. Hello, Wise Hollow. Hello, my darling. But yeah, I hope you guys like the new overlay and stuff. And you can all thank Sahara Llama for, helping me with this outfit. It came out really well. It came out really cute. Especially the book that I'm reading. Look at that, look at that, look at that. But yeah. It's so pretty and I love the outfit. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Yeah. It feels very apt. It feels... This is something that I wore to uni. This is definitely something that I wore to uni. Just like, I'm gonna come into uni with cute vibes, cute vibes, cute vibes. At least I'll say this was my first year. Wise Hollow says, hello, your aura was so strong I fell asleep before you even started stream. Girl, at least let me try. Resist the aura. What the hell? Though I will say, if you're listening to me read this book, it is very good, like, vibes. The Void has uni. You mean the Abyss. You mean the Abyss. The Abyss. Of course we have uni in the Abyss. Of course we have we are actually really, really good. We are really, really good with education. I don't know what you mortals are doing, but we're really, really good. How do you think I'm able to change outfits all the time? Magic. Magic. Okay. I could only come up with the Void. That's fair. You tried your best. Head pat, head pat. What in the therapy session is going on here? Definitely not therapy. Definitely not therapy. Asta, I don't possess magic. Yeah, I change outfits. Okay, but are any of your outfits bitchin' Legacy? Are any of your outfits absolutely hot to trot? Yeah, didn't think so. But my outfits are heckin' peak performance after peak performance. Can't best me. I am the best at outfits. All cute. And you're telling me you can get yourself Mary Janes? I bet you don't have Mary Janes. Yeah. Jade Fulton, thank you so much for the follow. Thank you. Thank you. If you guys are new here and you're following me, hi, my name is Astaroth. I am your Twilight Demon Villainess. I like to play indie games that are storytelling focused, as well as other games like Repo, Marvel Rivals, Magic the Gathering, and the like. We are doing a reading stream because I am a fantasy author, and I'm trying to get my community to read more so that they don't come to me and they're like, oh, I don't read books, because that That's not allowed in my community. Everyone has to read. So I am making it my job that everybody at least has me as their audiobook. You know what I mean? That way, it counts as reading, and I don't have to beat you up. Yeah. See, I'm helping you guys. I'm doing this for you. I'm not doing this for me. I could read books in my own time anytime. You know what I mean? I literally bought 2 new books the other day. I could be reading those, but instead I'm reading a book to you. Book idea, terms and conditions for Discord. We'd be here for 500 years. We'd be here for 500 years. Hello, Tobias. Hello, hello, hello. I bet Legacy wouldn't mind being beat up by you, though. You know what? That's true. I feel like I could tell Legacy, hey Legacy, I have to drop kick you tomorrow, and Legacy would be like, no problem, ma'am. Do what you need to do. Like, I feel like Legacy would be into that. You know what I mean? Yeah. All right. I'm going to be diving back into this book again, just to go over the trigger warnings for this book that I am about to read. I really want to preface it because I don't want anyone to be surprised. This book, so all the stories in this book may contain, portray, mention these themes, but they're not limited to them. So, adult and minor relationships, death, pedophilia, the R word, SA, sexual content, sexual violence, toxic relationships, normal violence, murder, cannibalism, addiction, confinement, and blood/gore, and there may be more. However, with this book, they are not so explicitly, well, I say that, but they were just describing cunts before, or clits before. So most of the time it's not too explicit. It is padded by very poetic language, and you will be able to tell when there is a lead up to it. If you are disturbed by any of these topics, any of these themes, if you are not feeling like you want to listen to this anymore, please do not hesitate to take a break or mute the stream. This book is a collection of short stories, as I've mentioned before, so depending on the length of the story, this one's 21 pages, and we've made it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Ooh, we've made it quite far, you guys. 10 pages. So we will be taking regular breaks. There, I can talk. All right. Everybody got that? Everybody heard the rulings and such? Great. I will dive back in. I think, anyway. Did I lose my place? Wait. No, I didn't lose my place. Okay. Outside our firelit privacy, I could hear the sound of the tide drawing back from the pebbles of the foreshore. It was nearly time for him to leave me. One single key remained unaccounted for on the ring, and he hesitated over it. For a moment, I thought he was going to unfasten it from its brothers, slip it back into his pocket and take it away with him. "What is that key?" I demanded, for his chaffing had made me bold. "The key to your heart? Give it to me." He dangled the key tantalizingly above my head, out of reach of my straining fingers, those bare red lips of his cracked sidelong in a smile. "Ah, no," he said, "not the key to my heart, rather the key to my Enfer." He left it on the ring, fastened the ring together, shook it musically like a carillon, then threw the keys in a jungling heap in my lap. I could feel the cold metal chilling my thighs through my thin muslin frock. He bent me over to drop a beard-masked kiss on my forehead. Every man must have one secret, even if only one from his wife. He said, "Promise me this, my wife-faced piano player. Promise me you'll use all the keys on the ring except that last little one I showed you. Play with anything you find, jewels, silver plate, make toy boats of my share certificates if it pleases you, and send them sailing off to America after me. All is yours and everywhere is open to you except the lock that this single key fits. Yet all it is a key to the little room at the foot of the west tower, behind the still room, at the end of a dark little corridor full of horrid cobwebs that would get into your hair and frighten you if you ventured there. Oh, and you'd find it such a dull little room. But you must promise me, if you love me, to leave it well alone. It is only a private study, a hideaway, a den, as the English say, where I can go sometimes on those infrequent yet inevitable occasions when the yoke of marriage seems to weigh too heavily on my shoulders. There I can go, you understand, to savour the rare pleasure of imagining myself wifeless." There was a little thin starlight in the courtyard as, wrapped in my furs, I saw him to his car. His last words were that he had telephoned the mainland and taken a piano tuner onto the staff. This man would arrive to take up his duties the next day. He pressed me to his vicuña breast once and then drove away. I had drowsed away that afternoon and now I could not sleep. I lay tossing and turning in his ancestral bed until another daybreak discoloured the dozen mirrors that were iridescent with the reflections of the sea. The perfume of the lilies weighed on my senses when I thought that henceforth I would always share these sheets with a man whose skin, as theirs did, contained that toad-like clammy hint of moisture. I felt a vague desolation in me. Now my female wound had healed. There had awoken a certain queasy craving, like the cravings of a pregnant woman for the taste of coal or chalk or tainted food, for the renewal of his caresses. Had he not hinted to me in his flesh as in his speech and looks of the thousand baroque intersections of flesh upon flesh? I lay in our wide bed accompanied by a sleepless companion, my dark, newborn curiosity. I lay in bed alone, and I longed for him, and he disgusted me. Were the jewels enough in all his safes to recompense me for this predicament? Did all that castle hold enough riches to recompense me for the company of the libertine with whom I must share it with? And what precisely was the nature of my desirous dread for this mysterious being who, to show his mastery over me, had abandoned me on my wedding night? Then I sat up in bed, under the sardonic masks of the gargoyles carved above me, riven by a wild sunrise. Or a wild surmise, sorry. Might he have left me not for the Wall Street, but for an important mistress? An importunate mistress, tucked away God knows where, who knew how to pleasure him far better than a girl whose fingers had been exercised hitherto only by the practice of scales and arpeggios. And, slowly soothed, I sank back onto the heaping pillows. I acknowledged that the jealous scare I had just given myself was not unmixed with a little tincture of relief. At last I drifted into slumber as daylight filled the room and chased bad dreams away. but the last thing I remembered before I slept was the tall jar of lilies beside the bed, how the thick glass distorted their fat stems so they looked like arms, dismembered arms, drifting, drowned in greenish water. Coffee and croissants to console this bridal solitary waking, delicious. Honey, too, in a section of comb on a glass saucer. The maid squeezed the aromatic juice from an orange into a chilled goblet while I watched her as I lay in the lazy midday bed of the rich. Yet nothing this morning gave me more than a fleeting pleasure except to hear the piano tuner had been at work already. When the maid told me that, I sprang out of bed and pulled on my old serge skirt and flannel blouse, costume of a student, in which I felt far more at ease with myself than in any of my fine new clothes. After my 3 hours of practice, I called the piano tuner in to thank him. He was blind, of course, but young, with a gentle mouth and grey eyes that fixed upon me although they could not see me. He was a blacksmith's son from the village across the causeway. A chorister in the church whom the good priest had taught a trade so that he could make a living. All most satisfactory. Yes, he thought he would be happy here, and if he added shyly, he might sometimes be allowed to hear me play, for, you see, he loved music. Yes, of course, I said. Certainly, he seemed to know that I had smiled. After I dismissed him, even though I had woken so late, it was still barely time for my 5 o'clock. The housekeeper, who, thoughtfully forewarned by my husband, had restrained herself from interrupting my music, now made me a solemn visitation with a lengthy menu for a late luncheon. When I told her I did not need it, she looked at me obliquely, along her nose. I understood at once that one of my principal functions as a chatelaine was to provide work for the staff. But all the same, I asserted myself and said I would wait until dinner time, although I looked forward, nervously, to the solitary meal. Then I found I had to tell her what I would like to have prepared for me. My imagination, still that of a schoolgirl, ran riot. A fowl in cream, or should I anticipate Christmas with a varnished turkey? No, I've decided. Avocado and shrimp, lots of it, followed by no entree at all, but surprise me for dessert with every ice cream in the icebox. She noted all down but sniffed. I'd shocked her. Such tastes. Child that I was, I giggled when she left me. But now, what shall I do now? I could have spent a happy hour unpacking the trunks that contained my trousseau, but the maid had done that already. The dresses the tailor-made hung in the wardrobe in my dressing room, the hats on wooden heads to keep their shape, the shoes on wooden feet, as if all these inanimate objects were imitating the appearance of life to mock me. I did not like to linger in my overcrowded dressing room, nor in my lugubriously lily-scented bedroom. How shall I pass the time? I shall take a bath in my own bathroom. And found the taps were little dolphins made of gold, with chips of turquoise for eyes, and there was a tank of goldfish who swam in and out of moving fronds of weeds as bored, I thought, as I was. How I wished he had not left me. How I wished it were possible to chat with, say, a maid or the piano tuner, but I knew already my new rank forbade overtures of friendship to the staff. I had been hoping to defer the call as long as I could, so that I should have something to look forward to in the dead waste of time I foresaw before me. After my dinner was done with, but at 7:15, when darkness already surrounded the castle, I could contain myself no longer. I telephoned my mother, and astonished myself by bursting into tears when I heard her voice. No, nothing was the matter, Mother. I have gold bath taps. I said gold bath taps. No, I suppose that's nothing to cry about, Mother. The line was bad. I could hardly make out her congratulations, her questions, her concern, but I was a little comforted when I put the receiver down. Yet there still remained 1 whole hour to dinner and the whole unimaginable dessert of the rest of the evening. The bunch of keys lay where he had left them, on the rug before the library fire, which had warmed their metal so that they no longer felt cold to touch but warm almost as my own skin. How careless I was. A maid tending the logs eyed me reproachfully, as if I'd set a trap for her, as I picked up the clinking bundle of keys, the keys to the interior doors of this lovely prison of which I was both the inmate and the mistress and had scarcely seen. When I remembered that, I felt the exhilaration of the explorer. Lights. More lights. At the touch of a switch, the dreaming library was brilliantly illuminated. I ran crazily about the castle, switching on every light I could find. I ordered the servants to light up all their quarters too, so the castle would shine like a sea-born birthday cake lit with 1,000 candles, one for every year of its life. And everybody on shore would wonder at it. When everything was lit as brightly as the café in the Gare du Nord, the significance of the possessions implied by that bunch of keys no longer intimidated me, for I was determined now to search through them all for evidence of my husband's true nature. His office first, evidently. A mahogany desk 1/2 mile wide, with an impeccable blotter and a bank of telephones. I allowed myself the luxury of opening the safe that contained jewellery and delved sufficiently among the leather boxes to find out how my marriage had given me access to the Jinn's treasury. Bracelets, rings. While I was thus surrounded by diamonds, a maid knocked on the door and entered before I spoke. A subtle discourtesy. I would speak to my husband about it. She eyed my serge skirts, superciliously. Yeah. Did Madame plan to dress for dinner? She made a moue of disdain when I laughed to hear that. She was far more the lady than I. But imagine, to dress up in one of my Poiret extravaganzas, with the jewelled turban and argaret on my head, roped with pearl to the navel, to sit down all alone in a baronale dining hall at the head of that massive board at which King Mark was reputed to have fed his knights. I grew calmer under the cold eye of her disapproval. I adopted the crisp inflections of an officer's daughter. No, I would not dress for dinner. Furthermore, I wasn't hungry enough for dinner itself. She must tell the housekeeper to cancel the dormitory feast I'd ordered. Could they leave me sandwiches and a flask of coffee in my music room? And would they all dismiss for the night? Mais oui, madame. I knew by her bereft intonation, I had let them down again, but I did not care. I was armed against them by the brilliance of his hoard. But I would not find his heart amongst the glittering stones. As soon as she had gone, I began a systematic search of the drawers of his desk. All was in order. So I found nothing. Not a random doodle on an old envelope, nor the faded photograph of a woman. Only the files of business correspondence, the bills from the home farms, the invoices from tailors, the billets doux from international financiers. Nothing. And this absence of the evidence of his real life began to impress me strangely. There must, I thought, be a great deal to conceal if he takes such pains to hide it. His office was a singularly impersonal room, facing inwards to the courtyard, as though he wanted to turn his back on the Siren Sea in order to keep a clear mind while he bankrupted a small businessman in Amsterdam, or, I noticed with a thrill of distaste, engaged in some business in Laos that must, from certain cryptic references to his amateur botanist's enthusiasm for rare poppies be to do with opium? Was he not rich enough to do without crime? Or was the crime itself his profit? And yet I saw enough to appreciate his zeal for secrecy. Now I had ransacked his desk. I must spend a cool-headed quarter of an hour putting every last letter back where I had found it, and as I covered the traces of my visit by some chance, as I reached inside a little drawer that had stuck fast, I must have touched a hidden spring, for a secret drawer flew open within that drawer itself, and this secret drawer contained at last a file marked personal. I was alone, but for my reflection in the uncurtained window, I had the brief notion that his heart, pressed flat as a flower, crimson and thin as tissue paper, lay in this file. It was a very thin one. I could have wished, perhaps, I had not found that touching, ill-spent note on a paper napkin marked La Coupole, that began, "My darling, I cannot wait for the moment when you may make me yours completely." The diva had sent him a page of the score of Tristan, the Liebestod, with the single cryptid word, "until," scrawled across it. But the strangest of all these love letters was a postcard with a view of a village graveyard, among the mountains, where some black-coated ghoul enthusiastically dug at a grave, this little scene executed with the lurid exuberance of Grand Guignol was captioned, "Typical Transylvanian scene, midnight All Hallows." And on the other side, the message: "On the occasion of this marriage to the descendant of Dracula, always remember, the supreme and unique pleasure of love is the certainty that one is doing evil. Toutes amites si." A joke. A joke in the worst possible taste, for had he not been married to a Romanian countess? And then I remembered her pretty, witty face and her name, Carmilla. My most recent predecessor in this castle had been, it would seem, the most sophisticated. I put away the file, sobered. Nothing in my life of family, love, and music had prepared me for these grown-up games, and yet these were clues to his self that showed me, at least, how much he had been loved, even if they did not reveal any good reason for it. But I wanted to know still more. And, as I closed the office door and locked it, the means to discover more fell in my way. Fell, indeed, and with the clatter of a dropped canteen of cutlery, for, as I turned the slick Yale lock, contrived, somehow, to open the key ring itself, so that all the keys tumbled loose on the floor, and the very first key I plucked out of the pile was, as luck or ill fortune had it, the key to the room he had forbidden me. The room he would keep for his own, so that he could go there where he wished to feel himself once more a bachelor. I made my decision to explore it before I felt a faint reassurance of my ill-defined fear of his waxen stillness. Perhaps I half imagined, then, that I might find his real self in this den, waiting to see if indeed I had obeyed him, that he had sent a moving figure of himself to New York, the enigmatic, self-sustaining carapace of his public person, while the real man, whose face I had glimpsed in the storm of orgasm, occupied himself with pressing private business in the study at the foot of the West Tower behind the still room. Yet, if that were so, it was imperative that I should find him, should know him, and I was too deluded by his apparent taste for me to think my disobedience might truly offend him. I took the forbidden key from the heap and left the others laying there. It was now very late and the castle was adrift, as far as it could go from the land and in the middle of the silent ocean where, at my orders, it floated like a garland of light. And all silent, all still, but for the murmuring of the waves. I felt no fear, no intimation of dread. Now I walked as firmly as I had done in my mother's house. Not a narrow, dusty little passage at all. Why had he lied to me? But an ill-lit one, certainly. The electricity for some reason did not extend here, so I retreated to the still room and found a bundle of wax tapers in a cupboard stored there with matches to light at the oak board at grand diners. Or dinners, I can read. I put a match to my little taper and advanced with it in my hand, like a penitent, along the corridor hung with heavy, I think, Venetian tapestries. The flame picked out here, the head of a man, there, the rich beast of a woman spilling through a rent in her dress. The rape of Sabine's, perhaps. The naked swords and immolated horses suggested some grisly mythological subject. The corridor wound downwards. There was almost an imperceptible ramp to the thick carpeted floor. The heavy hangings on the wall muffled my footsteps, even my breathing. For some reason, it grew very warm. The sweat sprang out in beads on my brow. I could no longer hear the sound of the sea. Along a winding corridor, as if I were in the viscera of the castle, and this corridor led to a door of worm-eaten oak, low round-topped, barren with black iron. And still I felt no fear. No raising of the hairs on the back of the neck, no prickling of the thumbs. The key slid into the new lock as easily as a hot knife into butter. No fear, but a hesitation, a holding of the spiritual breath. If I had found some traces of his heart in a file marked personal, perhaps here, in his subterranean privacy, I might find a little of his soul. It was the consciousness of the possibility of such a discovery, of its possible strangeness, that kept me from a moment of motionlessness. Before, in foolhardiness of my already subtly tainted innocence, I turned the key and the door slowly creaked open. There is a striking resemblance between the act of love and the ministrations of a torturer. I opened my husband's favourite poet. I had learned something of the nature of that similarity on my marriage bed, and now my taper showed me the outlines of a rack. There was also a great wheel, like the ones I had seen in woodcuts of the martyrdoms of the saints, in my old nurse's little store of holy books, and just one glimpse of it before my little flame caved in, and I was left in absolute darkness. A metal figure, hanging at the side, which I knew to be spiked on the inside, and to have a name. The Iron Maiden. Absolute darkness, and about me the instruments of mutilation. Until that moment, this spoiled child did not know she had inherited nerves and a will from the mother who had defied the yellow outlaws of Indochina. My mother's spirit drove me on, into that dreadful place, in a cold ecstasy to know the very worst. I fumbled for the matches in my pocket. What a dim, lugubrious light they give. And yet enough, more than enough, to see a room designed for desecration and some dark night of unimaginable lovers whose embraces were annihilation. The walls of this stark torture chamber were the naked rock. They gleamed as if they were sweating with fright. At the four corners of the room were funerary urns of great antiquity. Etruscan, perhaps, and on three-legged ebony stands the bowls of incense he had left burning, which filled the room with a sacerdotal reek. Wheel, rack, and Iron Maiden were, I saw, displayed as grandly as if they were items of statuary, and I was almost consoled. and almost persuaded myself that I might have stumbled only upon a little museum of his perversity, that he had installed these monstrous items here only for contemplation. Yet at the centre of the room lay a cataphylact, a doomed, ominous bier of Renaissance workmanship, surrounded by long white candles, and at its foot an armful of the same lilies with which he had filled my room, stowed in a 4-foot-high jar glazed with a sombre Chinese red. I scarcely dared examine this cataphylact and its occupant more closely, yet I knew I must. Every time I struck a match to light those candles round her bed, it seemed a garment of that innocence of mine for which he had lustfully fell away from me. The opera singer lay quite naked under a thin sheet of rare and precious linen, such as the princes of Italy used to shroud those whom they had poisoned. I touched her very gently on the white breast. She was cool. He had embalmed her. On her throat I could see the blue imprint of a strangler's fingers. The cool, sad flame of the candles flickered on her white, closed eyelids. The worst thing was, the dead lips smiled. Beyond the cataphylact, in the middle of the shadows, a white, nacreous glimmer. As my eyes accustomed themselves to the gathering darkness, I at last, oh the horrors, made out a skull. Yes, a skull, so utterly denuded, now of flesh, that it scarcely seemed possible that stark bone had once been richly upholstered with life. And this skull was strung up by a system of unseen cords, so that it appeared to be hanging, disembodied, in the still, heavy air. And it had been crowned with a wreath of white roses and a veil of lace, the final image of his bride. Yet the skull was still so beautiful, had shaped with its sheer plane so imperiously the face that had once existed above it, that recognized her the moment I saw her, face of the evening star walking on the rim of night. One false step, oh, my poor dear girl, next, in the fated sisterhood of his wives, one false step and into the abyss of the dark you stumbled. And where was she, the latest dead, the Romanian countess who might have thought her blood would survive this depredations? I knew she must be here, in the place that had wound me through the castle towards it on a spool of inexorability. But at first I could see no sign of her. Then, for some reason, perhaps some change of atmosphere wrought by my presence, the metal shell of the Iron Maiden emitted a ghostly twang. My feverish imagination must have guessed its occupant was trying to clamber out, though even in the midst of my rising hysteria I knew she must be dead to find a home there. With trembling fingers, I prized open the front of the upright coffin, with its sculpted face caught in a rictus of pain. Then, overcome, I dropped the key I still held in my other hand. It dropped into the forming pool of her blood. She was pierced, not by one, but by 100 spikes. This child of the land of the vampires who seemed so newly dead, so full of blood, oh God. How recently had he become a widower? How long had he kept her in this obscene cell? Had it been all the time he had courted me in the clear light of Paris? I closed the lid of her coffin very gently and burst into a tumult of sobbing that contained both pity for his other victims and also a dreadful anguish to know I, too, was one of them. The candle flared, as if in a draught from the door to elsewhere. The light caught the fire opal on my hand so that it flashed once with a baleful light, as if to tell me the eye of God, his eye, was upon me. My first thought when I saw the ring for which I had sold myself to this fate was how to escape. I retained sufficient presence of mind to snuff out the candles round the bier with my fingers, to gather up my taper, to look around, although shuddering, to ensure I had left behind me no traces of my visit. I retrieved the key from the pool of blood, wrapped it in my handkerchief to keep my hand clean, and fled the room, slamming the door behind me. It crashed to with a juddering reverberation like the door of hell. I could not take refuge in my bedroom, for that retained the memory of his presence, trapped in the fathomless silvering of his mirrors. My music room seemed the safest place, although I looked at the picture of Saint Cecilia with a feint of dread. What had been the nature of her martyrdom? My mind was in tumult. Schemes for flight jostled with one another. As soon as the tides receded from the causeway, I would make for their mainland, on foot, running, stumbling. I did not trust that leather-clad chauffeur, nor the well-behaved housekeeper, and I dared not take any of the pale, ghostly maids into my confidence either, since they were his creatures, all. Once at the village, I would fling myself directly on the mercy of the gendarmerie. But could I trust them either? His forefathers had ruled this coast for 8 centuries, from this castle whose moat was the Atlantic. Might not the police, the advocates, even the judge, all be in his service, turning a blind eye to his vices, since he was my lord, whose word must be obeyed? Who, on this distant coast, would believe the white-faced girl from Paris, who came running to them with a shuddering tale of blood, of fear, of the ogre murmuring in the shadows? Or, rather, they would immediately know it to be true, but were all honour-bound to let me carry it no further. Assistance. My mother. I ran to the telephone, and the line, of course, was dead. Dead as his wives. A thick darkness, unlit by any star, still glazed the windows. Every lamp in my room burned to keep the dark outside, yet it seemed still to encroach on me, to be present beside me, but as if masked by my light, the night like a permeable substance that could seep into my skin. I looked at the precious little clock that made from hypocritically innocent flowers long ago in Dresden. The hand had scarcely moved 1 single hour forward from when I first descended to that private slaughterhouse of his. Time was his servant too. It would trap me here, in a night that would last until he came back to me, like a black sun on a hopeless morning. And yet the time might still be my friend. At that hour, that very hour, he set sail for New York. To know that, in a few moments, my husband would have left France calmed my agitation just a little. My reason told me I had nothing to fear. The tide that would take him away to the new world would let me out of imprisonment of the castle. Surely I could easily evade the servants. Anyone can buy a ticket at a rail station, yet I was still filled with unease. I opened the lid of the piano. Perhaps I thought my own particular magic might help me now. That I could create a pentacle out of music that would keep me from harm. For if my music had first ensnared him, then might it not also give me the power to free myself from him? Mechanically, I began to play, but my fingers were stiff and shaking. At first, I could manage nothing but better than the exercises of Czerny. But simply the act of playing soothed me, and for solace, for the sake of the harmonious rationality of its sublime mathematics, I searched among his scores until I found the well-tempered clavier. I set myself the therapeutic task of playing all Bach's equations, every one. And I told myself if I played them all through without a single mistake, then the morning would find me once more a virgin. Crash of a dropped stick. His silver-headed cane. What else? Sly, cunning, he had returned. He was waiting for me outside the door. I rose to my feet. Fear gave me strength. I flung back my head defiantly. "Come in!" My voice astonished me by its firmness, its clarity. The door slowly, nervously opened, and I saw not the massive, irredeemable bulk of my husband, but the slight, stooping figure of the piano tuner. He looked far more terrified of me than my mother's daughter would have been of the devil himself. In the torture chamber, it seemed to me that I would never laugh again. Now, helplessly, laugh I did, with relief. And, after a moment's hesitation, the boy's face softened and he smiled a little, almost in shame. Though they were blind, his eyes were singularly sweet. "Forgive me," said John Ives. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but either way, it's the French, whatever. "I know I've given you grounds for dismissing me, that I should be crouching outside your door at midnight, but I heard you walking about and up and down. I sleep in the room at the foot of the West Tower, and some intuition told me you could not sleep and might, perhaps, pass the insomniac hours at your piano. And I could not resist that. Besides, I stumbled over these." And he displayed the ring of keys I dropped outside my husband's office door. The ring from which one key was missing. I took them from him, looked round for a place to stow them, fixed on the piano stool as if to hide them would protect me. Still, he stood smiling at me. How hard it was to make everyday conversation. "It's perfect," I said. "The piano, perfectly in tune." But he was full of the loquacity of embarrassment, as though I would only forgive him for his impudence if he explained the cause of it thoroughly. "When I heard you play this afternoon, I thought I'd never heard such a touch, such technique, a treat for me to hear, a virtuoso. So I crept up to your door now, humbly as a little dog might, madame, and put my ear to the keyhole and listened, until my stick fell to the floor through a momentary clumsiness of mine, and I was discovered." He had the most touchingly ingenuous smile. "Perfectly in tune," I repeated. To my surprise now, I had said it. I found I could not say anything else. I could only repeat, "In tune. Perfect. In tune." Over and over again. I saw a dawning of surprise in his face. My head throbbed. To see him in his lovely, blind humanity seemed to hurt me very piercingly. Somewhere inside my breast, his figure blurred. The room swayed about me. After the dreadful revelation of that bloody chamber, it was his tender look that made me faint. When I recovered consciousness, I found I was laying in the piano tuner's arms, and he was tucking the satin cushion from the piano stool under my head. "You're in some great distress," he said. "No bride should suffer so much so early in her marriage." His speech had the rhythms of the countryside. Just double checking, stream didn't die. The rhythms of the tide. Any bride brought to this castle should come ready dressed in mourning. Should bring a priest and a coffin with her, I said. "What's this?" It was too late to keep silent, and if he, too, were one of my husband's creatures, then at least he had been kind to me. So I told him everything. The keys, the interdiction, my disobedience, the room, the rack, the skull, the corpses, the blood. "I can scarcely believe it," he said, wondering. That man, so rich, so well born. Here's proof, I said, and tumbled the fatal key out of my handkerchief onto the silken rug. Oh, God, he said, I can smell the blood. He took my hand, pressed his arms about me. Although he was scarcely more than a boy, I felt a strength flow into me from his touch. We whisper all manner of strange tales up and down the coast, he said. There was a marquis, once, who used to hunt young girls on the mainland. He hunted them with dogs, as though they were foxes. My grandfather had it from his grandfather, how the marquis pulled a head out of his saddlebag and showed it to the blacksmith while the man was shoeing his horse. A fine specimen of a genius brunette, eh, Guillaume? And it was the head of the blacksmith's wife. But in these more democratic times, my husband must travel as far as Paris to do his hunting in the saloons. John Ives knew, the moment I shuddered. Oh, madame, I thought all these were old wives' tales, chattering of fools, spooks to scare bad children into good behaviour. Yet, how could you know, a stranger, that the old name for this place is the Castle of Murder? How could I know indeed? Except that in my heart I'd always known its lord would be the death of me. Hark, said my friend suddenly. The sea has changed key. It must be near morning, the tide is going down. He helped me up. I looked from the window towards the mainland, along the causeway where the stones gleamed wetly in the thin light of the end of the night, and, with an almost unimaginable horror, a horror the intensity of which I cannot transmit to you, I saw in the distance, still far away, yet drawing moment by moment inexorably nearer, the twin-headed lamps of his great black car, gouging tunnels through the shifting mist. My husband had indeed returned. This time, it was no fancy. The key, said John Ives. It must go back on the ring, with the others, as though nothing had happened. But the key was still caked with wet blood. And I ran to my bathroom and held it under the hot tap. Crimson water swirled down the basin, but, as if the key itself were hurt, the bloody token stuck. The turquoise eyes of the dolphin taps winked at me derisively. They knew my husband had been too clever for me. I scrubbed the stain with my nail brush, but still it would not budge. I thought how the car would be rolling silently towards the closed courtyard gate. The more I scrubbed the key, the more vivid grew the stain. The bell in the gatehouse would jangle. The porter's drowsy son would push back the patchwork quilt, yawning, pull the shirt over his head, thrust his feet into his boots. Slowly, slowly, open the door for your master, as slowly as you can. And still the bloodstain mocked at the fresh water that spilled from the mouth of the leering dolphin. You have no more time, said John Eves. He is here. I know it. I must stay with you. You shall not, I said. Go back to your room now, please. He hesitated. I put an edge of steel in my voice, for I knew I must meet my lord alone. Leave me. As soon as he had gone, I dealt with the keys and went to my bedroom. The causeway was empty. John Ives was correct. My husband had already entered the castle. I pulled the curtains close, stripped off my clothes, and pulled the bed curtain around me as a pungent aroma of Russian leather assured me my husband was once again beside me. Dearest! With the most treacherous, lascivious tenderness, he kissed my eyes, and, mimicking the new bride newly awakened, I flung my arms around him, for on my seeming acquiescence depended on my salvation. Thus, Sylvia of Rio outwitted me, he said wryly. My New York agent telegraphed Le Havre Lehev. French words. And saved me a wasted journey. So we may resume our interrupted pleasures, my love. I did not believe one word of it. I knew I had behaved exactly according to his desires. Had he not bought me so that I should do so? I had been tricked into my own betrayal to that illimitable darkness whose source I had been compelled to seek in his absence, and now that I had met that shadowed reality of his life that came to play only in the presence of his own atrocities, I must pay the price of my new knowledge. The secret of Pandora's box. But he had given me the box himself, knowing I must learn the secret. I had played a game in which every move was governed by a destiny as oppressive and omnipotent as himself. Since that destiny was himself, and I had lost. Lost at the charade of innocence and vice in which he had engaged me. Lost as the victim loses to the executioner. His hand brushed against my breast beneath the sheet. I strained my nerves, yet could not help flinch from the intimate touch, for it made me think of the piercing embrace of the Iron Maiden, and of his lost lovers in the vault. When he saw my reluctance, his eyes veiled over, and yet his appetite did not diminish. His tongue ran over red lips already wet. Silent, mysterious, he moved away from me to draw off his jacket. He took the gold watch from his waistcoat and laid it on the dressing table like a good bourgeoisie, scooped out his rattling loose change, and now, oh God, makes a great play of patting his pocket officiously. Puzzled lips pursed, searching for something that has been mislaid, then turns to me with a ghastly and triumphant smile. But of course, I gave the keys to you. Your keys? Why, of course, here, they're under the pillow. Wait a moment, what? No, now, where could I have left them? I was whiling away the evening without you at the piano. I remember, of course, the music room. Brusquely, he flung my negligee of antique lace on the bed. Go and get them. Now? This moment? Can't it wait until morning, my darling? I forced myself to be seductive. I saw myself pale, pliant as a plant that begs to be trampled underfoot, a dozen vulnerable, appealing girls reflected in as many mirrors, and I saw how he almost failed to resist me. If he had come to me in bed, I would have strangled him then. But he half snarled, "No, it won't wait. Now." The unearthly light of dawn filled the room. Had only one previous dawn broken upon me in that vile place? And there was nothing for it but to go and fetch the keys from the piano stool, and pray he would not examine them too closely. Pray to God his eyes would fail him, that he might be struck blind. When I came back into the bedroom carrying the bunch of keys that jangled at every step like a curious musical instrument, he was sitting on the bed in his immaculate shirt sleeves, his head sunk in his hands. It seemed to me he was in despair. Strange, in spite of my fear of him that made me whiter than my wrap. I felt there emanate from him at that moment a stench of absolute despair, rank and ghastly, as if the lilies that surrounded him had all at once begun to fester, or the Russian leather of his scent were reverting to the elements of flayed hide and excrement of which it was composed. The chthonic gravity of his presence exerted a tremendous pressure on the room, so that the blood pounded in my ears as if we had been precipitated to the bottom of the sea beneath the waves that pounded against the shore. I held my life in my hands amongst those keys and, in a moment, would place it between his well-manicured fingers. The evidence of that bloody chamber had showed me I could expect no mercy. Yet when he raised his head and stared at me with his blind, shuddering eyes as though he did not recognize me, I felt a terrified pity for him, for this man who had lived in such strange, secret places that if I loved him enough to follow him, I should have to die. The atrocious loneliness of that monster. Sorry, moving things. The monocle had fallen from his face. His curling mane was disordered, as if he had run his hands through it in his distraction. I saw how he had lost his impassivity, and was now filled with suppressed excitement. The hand he stretched out for those counters in his game of love and death shook a little. The face that turned towards me contained a somber delirium that seemed to me compounded of a ghastly, yes, shame, but also of a terrible guilty joy as he slowly asserted how I had sinned. That telltale stain had resolved itself into a mark, the shape and brilliance of the heart on a playing card. He disengaged the key from the ring and looked at it for a while, solitary, brooding. "It is the key that leads to the kingdom of the unimaginable," he said. His voice was low, and had in it the timbre of a certain great cathedral organ that seem, when they are played, to be conversing with God. I could not restrain a sob. "Oh, my love, my little love who brought me a white gift of music," he said, almost as if grieving. "My little love, you'll never know how much I hate daylight." Then he sharply ordered, "Kneel." I knelt before him, and he pressed the key lightly to my forehead, held it there for a moment. I felt a faint tingling of the skin, and when I involuntarily glanced at myself in the mirror, I saw a heart-shaped stain had transferred itself to my forehead, to the space between the eyebrows, like the cast mark of a Brahmin woman, or the mark of Cain. Now, the key gleamed as freshly as if it had just been cut. He clipped it back on the ring, emitting that same heavy sigh as he had done when I said that I would marry him. "My virgin of arpeggios, prepare yourself for martyrdom." "What form shall I take?" I said. "Decapitation," he whispered almost voluptuously. "Go and bathe yourself. Put on that white dress you wore to hear Tristan, and the necklace that prefigures your end. And I shall take myself off to the armory, my dear, to sharpen my great-grandfather's ceremonial sword. The servants? We shall have absolute privacy for our last rites. I have already dismissed them. If you look out the window, you can see them going to the mainland." It was now the full pale light of the morning. The weather was grey, indeterminate. The sea had an oily, sinister look, and a gloomy day on which to die. Along the causeway, I could see trooping every maid and scullion, every potboy and pan-scourer, valet, laundress, and vassal who worked in that great house, most on foot, a few on bicycles. The faceless housekeeper trudged along with a great basket in which, I guess, she stowed as much as she could ransack from the larder. The Marquis must have given the chauffeur leave to borrow the motor for the day, for it went last of all at a stately pace, as though the procession were a cortege, and the car already bore my coffin to the mainland for burial. But I knew no good Breton earth would cover me. Like a last faithful lover, I had another fate. "I have given them all a day's holiday to celebrate our wedding," he said, and smiled. However hard I stared at the receding company, I could see no sign of John Ives. Our latest servant, hired but the preceding morning. "Go, now. Bathe yourself. Dress yourself." The lustratory ritual and the ceremonial robing. After that, the sacrifice. Wait in the music room until I telephone for you. No, my dear. And he smiled as I started, recalling the line was dead. One may call inside the castle just as much as one pleases, but outside, never. I scrubbed my head with the nail brush as I had scrubbed the key, but this red mark would not go away. Either, no matter what I did, I knew I should wear it until I died. Though that would not be long. Then I went to my dressing room and put on that white muslin shift. Costume of a victim of an auto da fe. He had brought me to listen to Leibestad in. 12 young women combed out 12 listless sheaves of brown hair in the mirrors. Soon there would be none. The massive lilies that surrounded me exhaled, now, the odour of their withering. They looked like trumpets of the angels of death. On the dressing table, coiled like a snake about to strike, lay the ruby choker. Already almost lifeless, cold at heart, I descended the spiral staircase to the music room, but there I find I had not been abandoned. I can be of some comfort to you, the boy said, though not much use. We pushed a piano stool in front of the open windows so that, for as long as I could, I would be able to smell the ancient, reconciling smell of the sea that, in time, will cleanse everything, scour the old bones white, wash away all the stains. The last little chambermaid had trotted along the causeway long ago, and now the tide, fated as I, came tumbling in, the crisp wavelets splashing on the old stones. You do not deserve this, he said. What can I say? Who can say what I deserve or no? I said. I've done nothing, but that may be sufficient reason for condemning me. You disobeyed him, he said. That is sufficient reason for him to punish you. I only did what he knew I would. Like Eve, he said. The telephone rang, a shrill imperative. Let it ring. But my lover lifted me up and set me on my feet. I knew I must answer it. The receiver felt heavy as earth. The courtyard. Immediately. My lover kissed me. He took my hand. He would come with me if I would lead him. Courage. When I thought of courage, I thought of my mother, and then I saw a muscle in my lover's face quiver. Hoofbeats, he said. I cast one last desperate glance from the window, and like a miracle, I saw a horse and rider galloping at a vertiginous speed along the causeway, though the waves crashed now high as the horse fetlocks. A rider, her black skirts tucked up around her waist so she could ride hard and fast, a crazy, magnificent horsewoman in widow's weeds. As the telephone rang again. Am I to wait all morning? Every moment my mother drew nearer. She will be too late, John Ives said. And yet he could not restrain a note of hope that, though it must be so, yet it might not be so. The third intransigent's call. Shall I come up to heaven to fetch you down, Saint Cecilia, you wicked woman? Do you wish me to compound my crimes by desecrating the marriage bed? So I must go to the courtyard where my husband waited in his London tailored trousers and the shirt from Turnbull and Asser, beside the mounting block, with, in his hand, the sword with which his great-grandfather had presented to the little corporal in token of surrender to the Republic, before he shot himself. The heavy sword unsheathed, grey as that November morning, sharp as childbirth, mortal. When my husband saw my companion, he observed, "Let the blind lead the blind, eh? But does even a youth as besotted as you are, think she was truly blind to her own desires when she took my ring? Give it back to me, whore. The fires in the opal had all died down. I gladly slipped it from my finger, and even in that dolorous place, my heart was lighter for the lack of it. My husband took it lovingly and lodged it atop of his little finger. It would go no further. It will serve me for a dozen more fiancés, he said. To the block, woman. No, leave the boy. I shall deal with him later. Utilizing a less exalted instrument than the one with which I do my wife the honour of her immolation, for do not fear that in death you will be divided. Slowly, one foot before the other, I crossed the cobbles. The longer I dawdled over my execution, the more time it gave me the avenging angel to descend. Don't loiter, girl. Do you think I shall lose appetite for the meal if you are so long about serving it? No, I shall grow hungrier, more ravenous for each moment, more cruel. Run to me, run! I have a place prepared for your exquisite corpse in my display of flesh. He raised the sword and cut bright segments from the air with it. But still I lingered, although my hope, so recently raised, now began to flag. If she is not here by now, her horse must have stumbled on the causeway, have plunged into the sea. One thing only made me glad, that my lover would not see me die. My husband lay my braided forehead on the stone, and, as he had done before, twisted my hair into a rope and drew it away from my neck. Such a pretty neck, he said, with what seemed to be genuine, retrospective tenderness. A neck like the stem of a young plant. I felt the silken bristle of his beard and the wet touch of his lips as he kissed my nape. And once again, of my apparel, I must retain only my gems. The sharp blade ripped my dress in two, and it fell from me. A little green moss growing from the crevices of the mounting block would be the last thing I should see in all the world. The whiz of that heavy sword. And a great battering and pounding at the gate, the jangling of the bell, the frenzied neighing of a horse, the unholy silence of the place shattered in an instant. The blade did not descend. The necklace did not sever. My head did not roll. For an instant, the beast wavered in his stroke, a sufficient split second of astonished indecision to let me spring upright and dart to the assistance of my lover as he struggled sightlessly with the great bolts that kept her out. The Marquis stood transfixed, utterly dazed, at a loss. It must have been as if he had been watching his beloved Tristan for the 12th, the 13th time, and Tristan stirred, then leapt from his bier in the last act, announcing in a jaunty aria interposed from Verdi that bygones were bygones, crying over spilt milk did nobody any good, and, as for himself, he proposed to live happily ever after. The puppet master, open-mouthed, wide-eyed, impotent, at the last saw his doll break free of their strings, abandon the rituals he had ordained for them since time began, and start to live for themselves. The king, aghast, witnesses the revolt of his pawns. You never saw such a wild thing as my mother. Her hat seized by the wind and blown out to sea so that her hair was her white mane, her black lisle legs exposed to the thigh. Her skirts tucked around her waist, one hand on the reins of the rearing horse, whilst the other clasped my father's service revolver, and behind her the breakers of the savage, indifferent sea, like the witnesses of a furious justice. And my husband stood stock still, as if she had been Medusa, the sword still raised over his head, as if in those clockwork's tableau of Bluebeard that you see in glass cases at fairs. And then it was as though a curious child pushed his centime into the slot and set it all in motion. The heavy bearded figure roared aloud, braying with fury, and wielding the honourable sword as if it were a matter of death or glory, charged us, all three. On her 18th birthday, my mother had disposed of a man-eating tiger that ravaged the villages in the hills north of Hanoi. Now, without a moment's hesitation, she raised my father's gun, took aim, and put a single, irreproachable bullet through my husband's head. We led a quiet life, the three of us. I inherited, of course, enormous wealth, but we have given most of it away to various charities. The castle is now a school for the blind, though I pray that the children who live there are not haunted by any sad ghosts looking for, crying for, the husband who will never return to the bloody chamber, the contents of which are buried or burned, the door sealed. I felt I had a right to retain sufficient funds to start a little music school there, on the outskirts of Paris, and we do well enough. Sometimes we can afford to go to the opera, though never to sit in a box, of course. We know we are the source of many whisperings and much gossip, but the three of us know the truth of it, and mere chatter can never harm us. I can only bless the... what shall I call it? Maternal telepathy? That sent my mother running headlong from the telephone to the station after I had called her that night. "I never heard you cry before," she said, by way of explanation. "Not when you were happy. And who ever cried because of gold bath taps?" The night train, the one I had taken, she lay in her berth, sleepless as I had been. When she could not find a taxi at that lonely halt, she borrowed old Dobbin from a bemused farmer, for some internal urgency told her that she must reach me before the oncoming tide sealed me away from her forever. My poor old nurse left scandalized at home. What? Interrupt my lord on his honeymoon? She died soon after. She had taken so much secret pleasure in the fact that her little girl had become a marquise, and now here I was, scarcely a penny the richer, widowed at 17 in the most dubious circumstances, and busily engaged in setting up house with a piano tuner. Poor thing. She passed away in a sorry state of disillusion, but I do believe my mother loves him as much as I do. No paint nor powder, no matter how thick or white, can mask that red mark on my forehead. I am glad he cannot see it, not for fear of his revulsion, since I know he sees me clearly with his heart, but because it spares me my shame. And that is The Bloody Chamber. We finished the story. Goated mother, yes. Goated mother, yes. Goated mother, yes. We love a badass mother. We love a really badass mother. Woman? What I love the idea of just her being like, she's crying. Who made my baby cry? And immediately got on horseback and was like, I need to go save my baby because I've never heard her cry before, and this is not it. This is not what we do here. This is not it, sir. So, yeah. That was The Bloody Chamber, you guys. It did have a lot of dark themes. It was very interesting. I'm going to go into a little ramble. Obviously, you guys can tell me what you think. I understand that it's a lot to take in. It is not the easiest story to read. I will say that. It is not the easiest story to read. It does have a lot of, like, big, complicated words that aren't typically used in conversational English. And I think I was right in correctly saying that a lot of the big words that she was using were or had roots in French. So, yeah, it was very cool. Very, very cool. Very telling. Very good. So this book, Angela Carter, again, there are other stories in this book, so if you would like to hear more, we can progress on to, not tonight we'll keep it there, but we can move on to next time, the courtship The Courtship of Mr. Leon, which I believe is shorter. Should be shorter. Let me see. Because this was 21 pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so 7 pages. It's much shorter. But a lot of the reason why Angela Carter, or at least the reason why I like this book, is that the way she describes him, you can tell immediately what the Marquis is like. You don't need to know about the Marquis's personal life. We don't need to know specific details about what he likes, what he doesn't like. We can already tell, because obviously this story is told in retrospect, that he is a perverse man. We can already tell, one, from the fact that she points out that she is 17, which is not... I mean, this is 17. I think she referenced the age of 1748. Depending of that time, she might have been considered a woman, but she is still pretty young and referenced many times as a child. Referenced many times as a baby, right? So there is the kind of juxtaposition of her being 17 and him being this unknowable older age that he, in her lifetime, has 3 different marriages. We can also tell that he is quite a forceful man, or a man that uses force, by the way she describes, just from the very beginning paragraph, because it's very evocative of sexualized language. Again, this is me teaching you guys, like, how to read between the lines. So Angela Carter could... Word choice matters, right? Angela Carter could have very well have been like, the train rolls in, the wheels go choo-choo, the horn goes honk-honk, and then we reach and we arrive. But she paints us, and she takes time to paint us, paintings also having a big significance in her story, but she takes time to paint us this picture of what we're getting into. So when she says, I lay awake in the wagon lit in a tender, delicious ecstasy of excitement. It's very alluring. Tender, delicious ecstasy of excitement. And her sentences are quite long as well. My burning cheek pressed against the impeccable linen of the pillow, and the pounding of my heart mimicking that of the great pistons ceaselessly thrusting the train that bore me through the night, away from Paris, away from girlhood, away from the white enclosed quietude of my mother's apartment, into the unguessable country of marriage. Now, that, again, pounding, thrusting, great pistons, a lot of those, I'm sure you heard it and the imagery popped into your head, reminding you of very sexual acts, right? So this is her preparing us, right? This is her as an author preparing us as readers of what we're going to get ourselves into when we meet the Marquis. She also takes time to describe the Marquis before he said any dialogue, as having a leonine head, a lion's head. This is a normal man. This isn't fantasy where, you know, he's a leonine, right? In D&D, I'm sure you're familiar. He's described as a lion man because lions hunt, right? She is described as a baby, as a victim, as it's all about purity. She's often dressed in white. There's so much symbolism in what she's made to wear and how he navigates it. And there's so much symbolism in how the author portrays the Marquis before we even hear his dialogue, right? And you know, we are given, I'm just trying to find it. We are given a very interesting conversation between Actually, before I move on to that, I'm going to keep on the marquee, right? So we know that he's kind of beast-like. He's a huge, towering man. Instead of long locks of hair, he has a mane. And we can tell that he's old because he has silver streaks in it. And everything he does with a purpose. Everything he does with intention. And you can see by... She has... Wise Hollow says, I understand the imagery, however, I must say lions don't usually hunt themselves. Well, lions who are mateless often hunt themselves, right? A lion would not be afraid to chase down food. And we can see towards the end of the story as well that the rumors that were depicting him as... or depicting his forebearers as hunters parading through the streets with the head of wives in their satchel. It's the same imagery. You don't imagine a lion as a pacifist, as someone who waits for food to come to him. Lions hunt. And the fact that he's been married 3 times, which we are told explicitly in the very first early pages of this story, means that not only are those marriages brief, but that they're going out like quick change. He specifically, and it is mentioned in the book, hunting women, specifically to bring back to his place, specifically to test them. This is not, you found out my secret, hon, guess I have to kill you. He knew that idle, at least with her, he knew that idle boredom for new wives, for people in different socio-economical classes than him, because again, he's the Marquis and this current lady is from a poor background. He knows that boredom breeds curiosity. And so planting, he could have very easily, again, he's a man of intention, he could have very easily given her the keys and said, these are all the keys to all the places in the house, and just removed the key to the room that he did not want her to go into. He could have kept that secret to his chest, but instead he went out of his way to specifically make a show of him hesitating to give her the key, to feed that curiosity. He made a show of saying, no, it's not a key to my heart, but it's a place I go to for when I no longer want to be with a wife. Where I want to go to a place where it feels like I am wifeless. So this man is intentional. This man is a hunter. This man is a beast. That is what we get from the first couple of pages, right? Not to mention how their first sexual encounter goes is also very telling. Very, very telling. Because again, she's 17 and she's a virgin. She has not had this sexual experience before. She knows what happens, but she's not had this experience. She's married, incredibly young. So for her, she is expected to feel excitement. She's expected to feel attracted to it. The notion that he picked her because she's corruptible, if that's not hunting, I don't know what is. It's very interesting. Again, I could go into a whole spiel about the meaning of womanhood and girlhood and the loss of girlhood and how she how he very quickly gets rid of the notion of her girlhood by having the maid clean up the sheets immediately, saying that he would if he could, hang those duvets out the window with her blood on it. From their but I just wanna okay, I'm gonna preface something. I'm gonna preface something weird. I wanna make sure I'm right. Okay, so I'm going to say this really kindly and really nicely. So, a lot of people believe that when you are having intercourse for the first time, that bleeding is the norm. And whilst bleeding can happen, you can have intercourse for the first time without bleeding if you are gentle, if it is wanted. And I will leave it at that. Bleeding typically happens when you are too vigorous, when you are too rough, when you are too violent. That's when that occurs. And a lot of people normalize it and it's like, yeah, you're supposed to have it the first time. No. There are a ton of people who do not. You know, again, I'm not a doctor. Bleeding can occur for many different reasons, but if there are no other circumstances surrounding why you might bleed, and it's just because you had intercourse, that person was being too rough with you. And so the fact, I mean, it was a notion from olden days, I should say. So the fact that she bled was, you know, the spilling of virgin blood and right? I could go into it. But the fact that he almost hinted at the notion of, if the times were back then, I would use it as a trophy. Your girlhood is my trophy. Interesting. Interesting notion to have. Very interesting notion to have. Dressing her constantly in white, having her decorate herself or wear the rubies whilst they're having intercourse. She was not a wife, she was an object. Or maybe wife and object are interchangeable for him as the Marquis. We can only assume. Yeah, he deserved to be chamber dumped, not just one bullet. Shake my head, shake my head. You know what? I think it's because here's the thing. I want to defend that by saying, Angela Carter is very specific with how she describes things. If she wants us to get the notion of violence, she will tell us. But I don't think she wanted to show the mother as violent. I think she wanted to show her mother as strong, as protective. And I think if she had unloaded the entire chamber in him, it would have been unnecessary. It would have been then excessive. Does that make sense? Like, he deserved it, for real. Like, girl, the way I would have done it. But I think that's the reason why. And also, the mother's such a good shot. She doesn't need to waste all those bullets on him. Using all those bullets would have been a waste. She's just like, you need one. You can charge at me with your barbaric, beastly self, and I will take you down. Like the animal you are. The hunter became the hunted. We like that parallel? We like that parallel? I also... Mum was a boss. Yeah, she was a big ass boss. I also appreciate that, you know, with like the John Eves. Girl, I'm pretty sure there's a way to pronounce his name. I could not figure it out. But when he very quickly went from Lil Jon, he very quickly went from the piano tuner to friend to lover. I don't know if you guys noticed that. He very quickly went from piano tuner, friend, lover, right? And I think that's a notion to her young heart and how swept away she is by new things, right? And also the fact that, like, being so young, you fall in love easy, which may also explain why she got with the Marquis in the first place. Because there's no way in friggity hell that you are gonna go and marry a man who's had 3 previous wives, one who's died recently, and you're not a little more cautious. I think that sense of naivete was really portrayed well as well. But, guys, that was the Bloody Chamber. That was the Bloody Chamber, you guys. It was the Bloody Chamber. Those poor previous wives. And the fact that he, like, he was like, on your knees now. Damn, guy. Damn. Chill. Fuck. Crazy. Crazy. Honestly. And the chamber was indeed bloody. Yes. Yes, it was. But are we talking about, you know, she does reference that torture room as the bloody chamber, but is that the only bloody chamber? Are we talking about something a little more graphic, like her first intercourse with him? Did her areas of, and this is a little gruesome, was her area of invasion, I'm trying to be really tricky because we're live on TikTok, but was that also considered a bloody chamber? You know? Like, there's so many different ways that we can kind of perceive it and frame it and just be like, oh, okay, through this lens, you know, what was the meaning behind this? Because with these kinds of books, things are framed very specifically. Oh my god, the Chamber of the Revolver as well. Exactly. Now you're thinking, right? There's so many different ways we can perceive that. The Bloody Chamber doesn't just have to be the torture room. That's the obvious one, right? That's the big reveal. It's the kind of, you know, this is the truth of the Marquis, but also every other chamber, quote unquote, that we come across, right, has also some significance. You know? And that's what I love about, at least that's what I loved about reading this book the first time. It was just very cool to go back and be like, ooh, wait a minute. Ooh, wait a minute. Ooh, wait a minute. And don't even get me started. Sorry. I get really passionate about these things. Don't even get me started, you guys, on the fact that she stumbled on his porn collection. She stumbled onto his porn collection, and what did he say to her? What did he say to her? When I first read that, I was gagged. Where are you? Where are you? You had sex. Where are you? Okay. He says, my little nun has found the prayer books, has she? He demanded with a curious mixture of mockery and relish. Then, seeing my painful, furious bewilderment, he laughed at me aloud, snatched the book from my hand and put it down on the sofa. Have the nasty pictures scared baby? Baby mustn't play with the grown-ups' toys until she learned how to handle them, must she? This is a perverted man. This is a pervert. This is a pervert. Like a straight up pervert. All of his perversions were the brutalization and the brutalization and the sorry, I'm trying to find it. The brutalization and the absolute desecration of women. If we want to talk about how the Marquis viewed women, I don't think he viewed them at all. I don't think he saw them. He saw objects. He saw fetishized, like, delusions of women. He never saw her as a wife. From the moment he met her, from the moment they went and saw Tristan, which was a script given to him by a previous wife. So it wasn't even like, this is a gift that I am giving to you because I know you like musicals. It stemmed from the interests of his previous lovers. He used their love letters as a guide to be like, what would this woman want? Because I can't fucking figure it out. Immolation of the wives of the Sultan. And I'm gonna, do you know what? I'm curious. I found it. So I believe the immolation of the wives of the Sultan was a practice for a collective people for self-immolation by women of sexual assault, sexual assault, enslavement, or my eyes. All of these searches are leading to essays. You guys get it. Give me a second. God damn it, it's so hard to find information nowadays. You guys get it. You guys get it, right? You guys get it. You get the notion. You get the feel. You get the vibe, all right? So, That was his pawn. That was the thing that he derived pleasure from. Yeah, we are a bunch of smart lads. Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. You guys are smart lads. Either way, I could talk for this book about... I could talk about this book for days, for years, for centuries, if I didn't stop myself. Genuinely, because there's just so much. There's so much to explore, and it's all so freaking interesting. You know? Also, Sahara Lama, thank you for deeming stretchy times. I shall. But yes, please let me know how you guys enjoyed it. I do want to kind of try and integrate a few more things. So I mentioned trying to integrate live captions so that you guys can see the words on the screen whilst I'm reading. Instead of just hearing me say it. I also would like to add some kind of more immersive stuff, but I need to figure it out. And yeah, thank you for story time. It was very relaxing to have on in the background. I'm glad, because that is the whole purpose. Oh my god, my fucking speech. The whole purpose of this stream, the whole point is for you guys to just put it on in the background, vibe, you know, as relaxing as a story like that can be. Yeah. I gotta say, the music lined up perfectly with the moment of the Marquise coming back. I was very happy when that happened. I was very happy. I was like, oh, let's go. You know, sometimes music lends itself to storytelling. But, you know, the reason why I have music and I want to add more, immersive things is because that's how I have it in my head. You know what I mean? Whenever I read a book, this is what it feels like, but without the actual music and without the sounds. That's what it feels like to just zero in on a book and be lost in it for hours. If I was reading on my own, I most likely could finish this book. But reading aloud, I tend to trip over my words. But it's okay. We vibe. We learn. But yeah, we shall continue with the Bloody Chamber, aka the other stories in the book. We have, as I mentioned before, the Courtship of Mr. Leon, the Tiger's Bride, Puss in Boots, the Earl King, the Snow Child, the Lady of the House of Love, the Werewolf, Company of Wolves, and Wolf Alice. And I will say that the Bloody Chamber is a reimagining of Bluebeard, I believe it's a reimagining of Bluebeard. Yeah, I'm trying to remember, but you know. Elru says your voice is the thing that made it relaxing. Thank you. Thanks. And I hope you guys like my little model for reading streams as well. And let me just, if you guys haven't noticed yet, the title of the book in my hand, you can thank Llama for that. You can thank Llama for adding that in. I'm totally not reading that right now. So, you know, you can thank Llama. Say thank you, Llama. Thank you, Llama, for being a meme. A big animal theme going on? Yeah. Top 10 twinks, Asta? Girl, do you want to be here all night? I gotta get up early. Do I? What time is it? I gotta go have dinner. I haven't done that. Uh-oh. Okay, sorry. I thought things disconnected for a bit. Yeah, I gotta go have dinner. I haven't had dinner yet. Your dog academia outfit is so cute. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Llama, for being a meme. Good, good, good. Tell him. Tell him so he can be even more of a meme. And then we can be memes together. Ha 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 ha. But also I want to say thank you to you guys for being really open-minded with all the themes and so on. Again, this is Grim Fairy Tales, so it's gonna be very, very dark. But, you know, the symbolism. The symbolism. I think the only thing is, you know, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of sites that list all the trigger warnings in this book. And I completely understand it's quite an old book. Back then, they were like, trigger warnings, just suck it up. But, you know, for you guys, I wanted to be very careful and very mindful and just be like, look, there are a lot of implications in this text of how their first time goes and, you know, violence against women and all these things. And I know sometimes it can be quite triggering. So I want to make sure that you guys were well aware, you know? Hello, Nicodict. Hello, hello, hello. Hi. But yes, hopefully we shall have more streams. With these vibes, I will find us more music to fit the courtship of Mr. Leon. As Wise Hollow said, a lot of animal theming going on. I wonder why. Is the commentary that men are beasts who hunt women prevalent in this book? I think so. I think so. I think so. But then it's very interesting because the last story that we have is Wolf Alice, so maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe we're getting some versions. Who knows? Not me playing coy with this book, honestly. But yeah, I love you guys. And I appreciate all of you kind of being here. I know it's not the typical high energy stream, but these streams are meant to be very chill, laid back, you know, use it as your sleep aid kind of deal. I know for some reason Purple app doesn't register, it doesn't register lurkers, I think. I don't know, but in any case, I still appreciate you being here, commenting occasionally, and just saying stuff. Once we get through this book, the next book we do will kind of be like a, okay, list me like your favorite stories, throw them at me, I'll like compile the most common ones into a list, and then we'll put that in a poll, and then see how that goes. But they do have to be of the my ear. They do have to be of the fantasy genre, and they do have to be from a kind of, you know, marginalized author, so a person of color, a person in the LGBTQ community, women, women or those in between, just so that we're not getting the same, just so that we're not doing what every other book talk account is doing and listing a bunch of white authors, because I'm tired. I'm tired of them. I'm tired. Let's get some interesting stories. I read a book. I read what's it called? I can't remember what it's called, but there's this book about a lady who the wife, there's a wife that's marrying into this like family, and she places a curse on the daughter because she finds out that the new wife is like this demonic creature in hiding trying to steal their fortune. And it's very like It's written by an Asian woman, and it's just very interesting to see how and what plots they explore. So, you know, I don't want the same old. I want different. I want different. The Woman in Black, is that fantasy? Woman in Black is like a horror book, right? Yeah, spooky, scary. Spooky, scary skeletons and shivers down my spine. Something, skeletons, something, spine. Spooky, scary skeletons, they do such a screech. They shake and shudder in surprise when you hear these zombies speak. We're so sorry, skeletons, you're so misunderstood. We only want to socialize, but I don't think we should. It's a spooky ghost story. Spooky, scary skeletons. Yeah. My favorite book. Okay. Why do you know so much of it? Why don't you know more of it? Is the bigger question. Don't stop putting me on the pedestal, alright? Don't stop putting me on the stand, sir. Alright? It's a vibe. You should know more of the song. You should know more. I'm disappointed, frankly. I'm disappointed. It's a spooky ghost story, my favorite book. We will have to see. For now, we're sticking with fantasy. So I'm not sure if that counts, because that counts more as horror than it does fantasy. La 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 la. This music is nice. It's very cool. But anyways, guys. White Solar says you're right. I am lacking spookage. Get more spookage in you. Get more spookage in you. Alright? Otherwise, how are we supposed to be friends? Did you think about that, Wise Hollow? If you don't have enough spooky in you, how are we supposed to celebrate Spook Month together? You're lacking. Spook Month is like every month, apart from Christmas. Spook Month is technically this month, and next month, and the month after, all the way to December. And in December, we take a break. And then when we come back right in January, Spook Month. New Year, see? Spooky. Second month of the year, spooky. Third month is like, the seasons are changing, spooky. There's a sun that visits the UK, spooky. Scary, spooky. "2026, spooky, see? The sun is a deadly laser." It is a deadly laser. The sun is a deadly laser. Hi. It's me again. I'm still a piece of garbage. Oh, I love those videos. I love those videos. So good. Legacy says, I haven't really read many books, but some of that I have listened to are cosmic horror from H.P. Lovecraft, and that's like the exact opposite. That's fine. That's fine. If there's a book that you guys, a fantasy book, again, from a marginalized author that you guys want to read, put it in. Put it in. I know there's some people who want me to read Mistborn. White man. Not to say there's anything bad with a white man, but like, let's get some stories from some people who are not gonna do the same stuff that all white authors do. Right? Let's get a bit of culture up in here. Let's get a bit of something up in here. All right? There is a book. It's not. I don't know what to call it. They count it as young adults, but it's like a assassin, like a teen assassin book by a black author. Had me absolutely gagged. Had me absolutely gooped. Right? Very enjoyable. I could read that to you guys. You know, that could be very fun. The reason why we stuck with Angela Carter and why Angela Carter is a white author, she's a woman, for one, and two, she's a white woman because we were going to stick with the classics for the first book. So once we get through the Bloody Chamber, we can then be free. Be free. Be free. Be free. Be free. You know what I mean? You guys know what I mean. You guys get it. You get it. You're gonna sit there and pretend you don't get it, but you get it. You get it. You get it, you guys. And even if you guys can't think of a fantasy story, guess what? I have tons. I have the Iron Maiden, which it's a long book and I have opinions on it, but we have the Iron Maiden, which is just, you know, written by queer Asian author, mechs, fantasy, Chinese mythology. Come on, let's get some pizzazz up in here. I love me medieval fantasy. I will not lie. My VTuber's lore is based in a kind of medieval fantasy-esque, but there are aspects that lean into different cultures and solar punk and all sorts of things, right? So let's explore, you guys. Let's take our bodies and be like, ooh, I'm exploring. I'm gonna open this door up and I'm gonna explore some culture. Ooh, let's not stick with the same white authors. Ooh, let's go. You know what I mean? Wise Hollow says, whenever I search for anime or manga, I always search for medieval fantasy as much as possible. No! Let's find some more. Let's explore. You know what I mean? Let's open the book, open the door, open the window, open the floor. Let's open things. Expand your mind. Expand! Because if you don't expand it, you'll just be happy with the same old, right? And you'll never be interested in new and different. It's like spelunking. That's what it's called, right? When you go cave diving? Spelunking. But for genres in fantasy that aren't written by white people. Yeah. Guys, be excited, let's do it. That does mean, however, that I unfortunately will never read like Lord of the Rings on stream. Unfortunately. That's the term for going cave diving, I believe. Wait, give me a second. Spelunking. It's exploring caves. So exploring caves is a hobby. It's also a sex act involving more than two people that utilizes a sawhorse, wasabi, a flashlight, and a Dremel. Whoa. I was just giving you the description of both the term spelunking and apparently its unofficial counterpart. Its Urban Dictionary counterpart, apparently. Legacy for mentioning Metal Gear again. That 5 years that I'll go without playing it. Yeah. Bro 40 was slick. Yeah. And then when we get to that 5 years point, I'm just gonna add another 5 years. The more Legacy, what Legacy doesn't know Guys, here's a secret. What Legacy doesn't know is that the more he talks about it, the more I don't want to play it. The more I don't even want to be near it. The more I don't even like, the more I hate it actually. The more I'm like, oh my god. I'm gonna outwardly hate this game. I'm gonna outwardly hate this game. I'm gonna have an irrational hate for this game. Because this guy can't take a shit without mentioning Metal Gear. This guy can't go online without talking about Metal Gear. Every time. I don't think there's been a week where he hasn't talked about Metal Gear. I think every week he talks about it. And it drives me insane. Because it's like, the world is so flourishing with so many things. And that's the only thing you want to focus on? Crazy. Wise Hollow, for that pun, 200 years. No Metal Gear, banned. I'm gonna start banning the word. I'm gonna start banning the word Metal Gear. All forms of it. There are so many other better games, right? Like if Legacy was obsessed with talking about, I don't know, In Stars and Time, I wouldn't mind it. I wouldn't mind it because you know what, I get it. In Stars and Time, it's a great game. Vampire, I don't mind that. That's a great game. Silent Hill, I haven't played that, but people say it's good. Resident Evil 9, that looks like it's fun. That looks like it's big fun. Silent Hill F, that looks like it's big fun. Big fun. You know? And the thing is, he keeps talking about it. And I'm just gonna, whenever he talks about it, I'm just gonna pretend like he turned invisible. I'm gonna be like, oh, so how's everybody doing? Whoa, we can't bash on other people's tastes openly like this. Bash? Listen. This guy will take any phrase. Like, you know how I just said invisible? He's like invisible, like the Metal Gear song. This guy will do anything to mention Metal Gear. I think that deserves some public humiliation. It's been going on for years. It's been going on for more than a year now. I'll have you know. So, yeah. You're getting hated on. Yeah. You remember all those times in stream where I was like, Legacy, stop talking about Metal Gear. Legacy, stop talking about Metal Gear. Legacy. And he doesn't listen. So guess what? I'm gonna keep ignoring Legacy until he stops talking about Metal Gear. Even if Legacy comes in and says hi, I'm gonna ignore Legacy until I haven't heard about Metal Gear for like 2 years. I'm determined. I will. At what point is it goof and gaffs and what point is it spam? Do I remove Legacy for spam? Or do I just ignore Legacy? Who knows? Who knows? Mama's already asked like 3 times. Shake my head. Oh. Okay, little fucks. I'm gonna hop off and put whatever food I believe I have, nugget and little smiley chips. I'm gonna go put that in the oven and I'm gonna eat it because I need to eat. But thank you for staying for my story time. I hope to see you all in the next one, which will hopefully, it won't be, so this won't be a weekly thing. This will just be every once in a while. So hopefully the next one will be sometime either next month. It'll be like a once a month thing or once every 2 weeks. We'll see. But yeah, thank you for joining me. Thank you for being cool and for not talking about Metal Gear Solid. So that's only Elru. Elru, I love you. This is the reason why you get all the best treats in the world. But yeah. Everyone take care. Good night, sleep tight, and don't let the bullety chamber haunt you at night. Yeah. Bye bye. Take care. Au revoir.
Mo, リスアステロース